We're live, just so everybody knows we're live. So just making sure that everybody knows. Ooh. Wow, Carrie, I have the power of muting. Did you know that? I just muted everyone. Let me stop.
That button.
I feel so powerful right now. I'm like, oh my God, I have access to the mute button. Okay. What else can I do here? Okay. All right, I'm gonna unmute everyone. That's just not fair. Okay. Counselor Yancey, I don't know if you've ever been to any of my hearings, but we tend to have a little bit of fun here, okay? Just so you know, the expectation is, you know, we have a lot of folks who tune in, and we really try to create an environment where people are learning, and also trying to make this as informational and as educational and as entertaining as possible within the laws of the construct of public hearing. So hopefully you'll be in for a treat today. Oh, I have to unmute all. Okay, go ahead. Sorry. Go ahead. You're still on mute.
How's that? Can you hear me now, Councilor?
Yes, now again.
All right. So this is my very first Zoom meeting in the Boston City Council, and it's quite an adjustment. Spending a few years in those chambers. I believe I'm the person who spent the most time in those chambers in the city's history. So this is quite an adjustment, but you know, I'm comfortable in my own home, so it should be a very interesting discussion, and folks should be able to have a very healthy and fun dialogue.
Yep. Great. And you know where your mute button is, and when you want to get off camera, you're more than welcome to do that as you need to. So thank you.
Very good. Now, I assume this is being recorded.
Absolutely. It's being recorded and it's being live streamed on YouTube as well.
Is it also on channel 8?
Yep. Channel. Let me go back up. I don't know I should know the channels by heart, but I don't. It's channel. Where is it? It's channel 8. Yes, RCN. And channel 82 and files channel 964.
Okay, very good.
Yeah.
Live at this time?
Yes, we're live. I think we're gonna get started. Carrie, are we good to go? Should we start? Do we have our panelists here? Is Natalia here with us as well?
I believe everyone's here. I just gotta click one more button, but we're ready to start when you are.
Hi, Natalia. It's good to see you.
Hi, Counselor. Nice to see you. Nice to see you, Counselor Yancey, as well. It's been a long time.
Yes, it's great to see you, and thank you for all your hard work.
Oh, of course.
All right. All right. We have some of our colleagues that have joined. Awesome. Excited.
So, Counselor, how many of your colleagues are with us this afternoon?
So right now, I believe we have Counselor Liz Braden and Counselor Campbell. And usually what happens, we have a few folks who join in. I'm going to send.
Counselor Arroyo's here as well.
Oh, Counselor Arroyo's in the house as well. Okay.
Very good.
Great. Thank you, colleagues, for joining. Natalia, what is your hard stop?
I believe I'm here till 3.
Okay. Natalia, I know whenever I chair these, I'm always like trying to keep you to the time. So I'm hoping that because we only have you for an hour, would love to just try to maximize on the amount of time that we get to spend with you today. So I'll be sure that my colleagues are brief with their opening remarks and questions, and we'll get you out of here in time, okay?
Yeah, I'll also be brief, and my 3 o'clock is flexible. So if I need to stay longer, I can always make that adjustment too, just to be able to answer all the questions that we can.
Thank you. Thank you. And I noticed that we've also been joined by Counselor Ed Flynn.
Very good.
Thank you, Councilor Mejia. It's good to be with you.
Thank you. Okay.
Madam Chair, we're ready to go when you are.
All right, so then let's just get started. I am calling this hearing to order. For the record, my name is Julia Mejia, City Councilor at Large. I'm the chair of the Boston City Council's Committee on Small Business and Workforce Development, as well as the lead sponsor. Recognizing my colleagues in order of arrival, we're joined today by Councilor Liz Braden of District 9, Councilor Andrea Campbell, District 4, Councilor Ricardo Arroyo, District 5, and Councilor Ed Flynn, District 2. In accordance to Governor Baker's March 12, 2020 executive order modifying certain requirements of the open meeting law and relieving public bodies of certain requirements, including the requirement that public bodies conduct its meeting in a public place that is open and physically accessible to the public, the City Council will be conducting this hearing virtually via Zoom. This enables the City Council to carry out its responsibility while adhering to public health accommodations and ensuring public access to its deliberations through adequate and alternative means. This public hearing is being recorded and it's being live streamed at boston.gov/city-council-TV and broadcasted on Xfinity, channel 8, RCN channel 82, and Files channel 964. If you wish to testify via video conference, please email ron.cobb@boston.gov to sign up. When you are called, please state your name and affiliation, residency, and limit your comments to no more than 2 minutes to ensure that all comments can be heard. And we're really sticking to that 2 minutes, okay, guys? You will also be able to submit written testimony by emailing ccc.sbwd@boston.gov. For those listening and watching to provide public testimony, we will keep you in the waiting room until the time arrives for you to provide testimony. We see you, so hold on tight. Today's hearing is on docket 0148, order of a hearing expanding access for minority business enterprises into high volume commercial centers. Our expected speakers today include from the administration, Natalia Irtebe, Director of Small Business Development, and our advocates, Shagun Irugu, Executive Director of BECMA, former City Councilor Charles Yancey, District 4, and Jada Turner, Founder and Managing Director, Black-Owned Boston Boss. I would like to begin with my own opening remarks and then pass it over to my colleagues. So, as the chair of the Committee of Small Business and Workforce Development, this issue is personal and professional to me. I have been able to start several nonprofits in my career, but due to commercial segregation that exists in our city, we have always struggled to move out of places like Dorchester, Roxbury, Mattapan, and Hyde Park. And while these are amazing neighborhoods that serve and need thriving commercial centers, it's not fair that Black and Brown businesses are always confined to predominantly Black and Brown neighborhoods. We need to see all people thrive in every single neighborhood of the city of Boston. Today's hearing is incredibly important, and while there are a lot While there's a lot of work to do to make all spaces more welcoming towards people of color in the city of Boston, today we are tasked with looking at small businesses in particular. I look forward to hearing from our panelists and from the members of the public who agreed to submit public testimony. I will now recognize my colleagues for brief opening statements before turning this over to our panelists. And when I say brief, I mean brief. And I want to remind everybody that I have the power of muting. No, so I'll start with Councillor Liz Breed, and you now have the floor.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you. I'm really here to learn more about your minority-owned businesses out here in Allston Brighton. We have many of our small businesses are owned by immigrants from all over the world. And I just want to hear what you folks have to say, what our panelists have to say, and see how we can empower our small businesses. So thank you. Thanks for the opportunity.
Thank you. Now everybody needs to model that behavior. Okay, Councillor Andrea Campbell, you now have the floor.
Thank you, Councilor Mejia, for your leadership on this issue. And of course, thank you to all of the panelists. And Councilor Yancey, it's so great to see you as well. And I just really look forward to the conversation. You're exactly right. Businesses run by people of color, women need the opportunity not only to grow in their neighborhoods, but to grow and expand across the entire city of Boston. And we can do that in this city. So thank you so much for your leadership.
Councillor Arroyo.
Yeah, I'll be very brief because I'm actually sick. But I wanted to make sure I was here for this because there's no more important issue regarding equity in the city of Boston than this. So thank you to the folks leading on this, to the panelists, to Councillor Yancey, who's here. It's good to see you. I've called you many a time, it seems, in the last year to ask you for certain pieces of advice. So thank you for being here. Thank you, Madam Chair. I look forward to hearing from everybody.
Thank you. Councillor Flynn, you now have the floor.
Thank you, Councilor Mejia. It's good to be with you and my colleagues and Natalia and my good friend, Councilor Yancey, who I've always had great respect for many years, Shagun, and incredible good work. Proudly support you, Councilor Mejia, on this initiative. And also I'm proud to have many immigrant-owned businesses, small businesses in my district, women-owned businesses, and communities of color-owned businesses. And Councilor Mejia, just as we go into the budget season, I would also like to know, or learn about, I should say, during this budget season, what is the appropriations, the budget this year will be for helping and support immigrant-owned communities of color-owned businesses. What's the financial number we're supporting this community with during this budget? So that's what I'd like to learn about. And I will definitely support it, but I want to make sure that there is funds and resources in the budget for this important initiative. Thank you, Councilor Mejia, for your leadership.
Thank you, Councillor Flynn. Councillor Flynn has been on fire lately, for those who have been paying attention, keeping us accountable to all things budget. Really do appreciate you. So we have a large number of people to give public testimony. So in order to prioritize their time, I would like to open up the floor for them to give their remarks. And I ask that everybody providing public testimony, please state your name and keep your remarks to no more than 2 minutes. Because we have so many people, we'll be keeping time, strict time, okay? And remember, I have the power of muting. And as some of you may be, as you are giving public testimony for the first time, I just want to remind you that comments should be directly, specifically to the docket we're discussing here today on small businesses throughout the city of Boston. So I'm going to start off with Kevin Peterson. And then just because I also want to be super mindful of the time, Natalia, as soon as we get through our panelists, I'd love for you to kind of react to what you heard, and then we'll dive into some questions, okay? Just to be super mindful of time. Everyone, I'm really hoping that you all stick to the 2 minutes just so that we can get through today. So let's start off with Kevin Peterson. You now have the floor. Kevin? I have asked to unmute you, so hopefully you're here with us.
You hear me now?
Yes.
Okay. And let me get on video.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. To Chairman Julia Mejia, member of Boston City Council, thank you for this opportunity to speak. Faneuil Hall and the Faneuil Hall Marketplace are civic sites of contention and infamy with regard to racial inequity in the city of Boston. Both sites point to the reality that economic inequality continues to persist in our city. Both places are sites that symbolize oppression meted out towards Black people and an unwillingness to confront the historic and contemporary civic sins associated with avarice and unchecked capitalistic inclinations within the context of our economy. It is true that within the long narrative of the city's history, both Faneuil Hall and the Faneuil Hall Quincy Marketplace signify places where fights for Black emancipation and women's suffrage were waged, yet these two sites are sites where humiliation and the degradation of persons were prosecuted in the form of the transatlantic slave trade. Faneuil Hall, from the very beginning, was a commercial site, the point about which we're discussing today. Its builder, Peter Faneuil, participated in the commercial trade of exchanging Black bodies for rum, sugar, and cash. It was a commercial site associated with greed and men mad with acquisitive and materialistic perspectives. It was a commercial site where Black men, women, and children were sold into a life of misery and social death. In Boston and across the globe, Faneuil Hall and the Faneuil Hall Quincy Marketplace were unfortunate commercial sites where the enslaved were treated by Boston's founding city fathers as nothing more than talking work animals. They stood, both these commercial sites, they stood as locations that had their significance in ensuring a regime of white supremacy. They were commercial sites. Faneuil Hall and the Faneuil Hall Marketplace were the proximate locations closely associated with the slave auction block. In 2021, we visit here today in the context of this hearing, the significance of Faneuil Hall and the Faneuil Hall Marketplace as sites where injustice is practiced every day. In 2021, Black, brown, and indigenous people are practically locked out from economic opportunities there. In 2021, soft racial economic apartheid is engaged at Faneuil Hall and other sites across Boston, like the Seaport and others, commercial districts such as Newbury Street. I would like to, Councilor, enter in the rest of my comments into the record to be officially noted. And if I may have one other opportunity to read it to the record.
Yeah, so I'm sorry, Kevin, just because we're really trying to keep time. Hold on. We're really trying to keep time. So,
yes. I will submit the rest of my comments for the record. I just have one other testimony to submit from Reverend Jesse Jackson of the Rainbow Push Coalition. And I will only present a portion of it and submit the rest into the record, please.
Sure.
Honorable committee chair and members of the Boston City Council. My name is Reverend Jesse Jackson, founder and CEO of the Rainbow Push Coalition. Boston is at a historic moment with regards to race, reckoning, and reconciliation. The new acting mayor represents the promise of finding common ground and achieving the beloved community. I'm pleased to have the Reverend Dr. Kevin Peterson in Boston working towards the goals and the mission of the Rainbow Push Coalition. The civil rights movement of the 1950s and the 1960s gave us the right to eat at lunch counters at Woolworths. That movement also allows us to segregate schools and foster public accommodations and voting rights legislation. Since then, the Rainbow Push Coalition has followed the legacy of Dr. King in terms of finding economic opportunities for those locked out of the national and local communities. I will skip down to just one section and complete and send the rest of the letter in for the record. Reverend Jackson says, I am aware of the struggles within the Black community, especially as they pertain to social justice. The income and wealth gap between Black and brown and white people in Boston is alarming. I'm aware of the lack of opportunities for Black entrepreneurs in Boston. My understanding is that of the 143 businesses at Faneuil Hall, not one is owned by a Black person. That's less than 1%. It is a disturbing reality, says Reverend Jackson, and it speaks to the persistent inequity in the city of Boston. I will submit the rest of that testimony for the record. Thank you, Madam Chair.
You're welcome, Kevin. And just want to be really, I appreciate your remarks about the commercial implications of the city. And I wanted to remind our guests again that we are specifically here to look at ways to build Black and brown businesses across the city. And we absolutely need to keep to time and our remarks brief, because there are a lot of people that all of them need to be heard. So I really would encourage everyone, when you hear the timer, to please be super mindful and respectful of the time, just because we do have a lot of folks signed up, and we also have the administration that we need to hear from, because remember, this is a hearing and we need to be solution focused, and would want to make sure that we have some time with Natalia from the administration to talk about how we get there, as well as giving an opportunity to our colleagues to chime in. Okay, so I'm gonna call in our former Senator Diane Wilkerson. You now have the floor, and I know you've done this before, so I don't even have to tell you what you need to do. Good to see you.
I just want to say thank you for the wisdom of having this hearing, Madam Chairwoman, and I want to testify in support of docket. I want to get it right, 0148. So I'm going to talk really fast, and here's the story, because this city council is critical to moving us to this next step. Before the pandemic, Black businesses and Latino businesses were already circling the drain. When I'm not dealing with COVID-19, my life has been focused on wealth building, economic development. So I want to tell you this. When the city of Boston got ready to build the new Boston Garden, or now TD North Garden, they came to the state for some support. I wrote in legislation requiring that if we were going to give them money, they had to commit to using Boston Jobs for Boston residents, an MBE contracting goal. And that's the condition upon which they got the money. When the city of Boston decided to build the new convention center in South Boston, the state built it, by the way. The city had to contribute $170 million. The city got that money by reissuing new medallions for the first time in 60 years for new taxis. That's how they raised their money. That's how they raised that money. That was our money. I wrote in the legislation, Chapter 152, the Act 1999, requirements that we use the city of Boston's MWBE contracting goals at the time when we had them. Our hiring numbers came, and that legislation came from the city of Boston. That's why we did it. Since then, we built a public market, which has 0 to 1 business of color in it with major city funds. We literally have watched in the last 10 years the creation of a totally new community that we call the Seaport, that has millions of dollars of city money there. And recently, this city council, one of the members, requested a hearing to target emergency and medical services to the Seaport. This city council has to take some responsibility and complicity, in my opinion, of the creation in the 21st century of a near all-white community right smack dab in the middle of our city. You have to. Why is this important? Because Faneuil Hall has none. The Boston public market has none, no Black and Latino. And we continue to talk about how we can service those buildings and spending our money. Yesterday, our Congresswoman, Ayanna Pressley, made a statement that is so relevant. She said, equity is not something that happens organically, right? You have to be intentional. Every single time we've had success, it's because we were intentional. Councilor Braden, I want you to know that the only Black business that got business in the first 7 months of the emergency COVID-19 spending was a PPE company located in Alston Brighton that I never met and recommended to the city. This city council has to get on board, because I'm glad Mia Grace is testifying. She'll tell you what's going on. The reality is we were circling the drain before COVID. Right now,
yes,
0.5% of the city of Boston's contracting dollars spent. So I do have an answer for Councilor Flynn as to what we need to do, and I'm happy to be involved in the future in that discussion of what budgetary needs are there. Thank you, Councilor. I tried to talk fast.
Yes, you did. And I wanted to give you a little bit of grace since I allowed Kevin to have a little bit of grace, but don't you all think I'm going to keep doing this. I appreciate your comments. I'm going to go next to Jean-Luc Pierret.
Thank you, Councilor Mejia. Yes, my name is Jean-Luc Pierret, speaking to you from Jamaica Plain, traditional indigenous territory, the Massachusetts Nation, president of the North American Indian Center of Boston. Peter Faneuil's uncle, Andrew, was selling Black human beings to other whites from his home. In January 1707, an advertisement appeared in a Boston newspaper that read in part, quote, "Ran away, a short, thick Indian girl named Grace, aged about 17 years. Her face is full of pock holes, very few hairs on her eyebrows, a very flat nose, and a broad mouth. Whoever shall apprehend and take up the said servant and deliver her unto Mr. Andrew Faneuil, merchant in Boston, shall be rewarded." I quote this because this is in part due, the foundational to the infrastructure in part that we are talking about today. The actual building of Faneuil Hall and the lack of BIPOC businesses therein. My understanding is that of 143 businesses, not one is owned by a Black person, and that is a disturbing reality to the persistent inequity in the city of Boston. Black and Indigenous liberation is intertwined, yet economic deprivation has been the worst among all of the multiple crises that our communities have had to navigate this past year and all throughout our lives. When individuals and communities are denied an opportunity to financially underwrite the future for themselves, then our city is made lesser. Conditions for Black, Indigenous, and people of color are substantially worse over the last 50 years. When the net worth of a Black family is $8 as compared to white families at $287,000, we have a serious problem. And for Dominican families, that same data shows that net worth is 0. And so that intersectionality of being Black and Indigenous is very crucial. And so we have to secure the financial security of our communities and entrepreneurship going forward. Thank you.
Thank you. Good job. Everybody needs to model that behavior. 2 minutes. Okay. Thank you. I'm going to go next to Jean-Claude Sanon. Yes, you're in the building. Good to see you here. Hopefully you're here with us. I don't see you. Is Jean-Claude with us?
Yes.
Yes.
Am I okay? Very good.
Yes.
Councilor, pleasure to see you. Thank you very much, and thank you, everyone. My name is Jean-Claude Sanon. I'm going to spit it up as if I do on the radio. And I live in the city of Boston at Rosendale. I'm a voter. I'm an activist, a community leader, a business owner. I'm invested in urging for racial equity in Boston. Please accept my statement today for the public record regarding Docket 210148. I wish to express my serious concerns about the lack of business opportunities at Faneuil Hall and the Faneuil Hall Marketplace in downtown Boston. As a member in the Boston Black Caribbean community, I'm aware of the lack of opportunities for Black entrepreneurs in Boston. My understanding is that of the 143 businesses at Faneuil Hall, not one is owned by a Black person. That's less than 1%. This is a disturbing reality and speaks to the persistent inequity in the city of Boston. I'm aware of the struggles within the Black community, especially as pertain to social justice. The income and wealth gap between Black, brown, and white people in Boston is alarming. Black communities lack of opportunities to thrive in the areas of education and public health. When Black people are looked out at places like Faneuil Hall and the Faneuil Hall Marketplace, the Black community is damaged. We all suffer from practices of discrimination. Obviously, this needs to change. I urge that you and your colleagues move quickly to establish enforceable policy to address the issues of economic inequity that now exist at Faneuil Hall. Therefore, please ensure that my statement entered into the public record today, and a pleasure to be here with all of you. Thanks a lot. I hope I met the record.
Yes.
Madam Chair, we cannot hear you.
I was just complimenting John that you actually had 24 seconds that I will use just to thank you for bringing your voice into the space. And I also want, for those who are tuning in, while we're hearing a lot of reference towards Faneuil Hall, that we're also ensuring that businesses are, like Senator Wilkinson mentioned earlier, we're looking at ways that we can also have presence in the Seaport, on Newberry Street, all across the city. We should be advocating and pushing for businesses all across to have exposure. And I also want to just note that and advise that we've also been joined by Councilor at Large Asabi George. Thank you. So right now, I believe Nia was signed up, but she's not in the attendees or here yet. So I am going to move on to, if Senator Wilkinson, if you don't mind texting her, just so that we can loop back to her. But right now I'd like to move over to to Natalia Irtebe. You now have the floor.
Thank you so much, Counselor. My name is Natalia Irtebe. I'm the Director of Small Business in the Office of Economic Development. So I had prepared a presentation, but I want to just touch on a couple of things, and I won't present it. I see you shaking your head. So a couple of things that I do want to talk to in regards to the docket about expanding Black-owned businesses across the city into retail and business opportunities. I want to say that is something that my team has been working on, not officially, because it is not one of our funded programs. But we have been working to help businesses prepare for RFPs in public spaces, in addition to helping businesses prepare for their own growth. And that might mean going into a second location, that might mean exploring new options. I want to just be super clear about kind of what our role is, and our role is to support small businesses into those endeavors, and not necessarily to get too heavily involved or get involved at all in private contracts between a landlord and a business owner. So I think those are some of the issues that I think we really need to tackle in this hearing and in this conversation, is about what are the things that the city can do to support businesses and establishing businesses in those spaces across the city. And then I'm happy to, answer specific questions about the work that we do. Our technical assistance program is designed to help businesses with whatever they're looking for. So we have worked with businesses who have come to us around helping them connect with landlords, connect with properties and spaces, which is, I think, the biggest and most significant role that the city can play in this particular space around access to physical retail spaces outside of Dorchester, Mattapan, Roxbury, etc.
Wow. Good job, Natalia. Thank you for utilizing your time wisely. I really do appreciate it. And if there is some time, we'll make sure that we share your presentation publicly, so then that way the information still gets out. And feel free to incorporate whatever information you had in some of your responses. So I'm going to move over just so that we can get to our second panel. I'm going to just ask my colleagues to keep their questions. We're going to do no more than 5 minutes. So I'm going to go first to Councillor Breeden.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I really would like to hear from some of the advocates about what mechanisms we can use what are the barriers, and what tools do we have in the kit to try and empower minority, Black and Brown, minority-owned businesses to to access, to broaden their reach in terms of the parts of the city that they can work in, they can have their business in.
I'm going to open it up to Shagun and others who have not done their introductions just yet to participate in answering some of these questions too, because just I think the work that you all have been doing in this space can definitely address some of the questions that will come in this round. So feel free to lean in and participate in the conversation. So you could raise your hand if you want to comment or answer that question.
I'll be happy to chime in.
Please.
My name is Charles Yancey, and I'm very honored to be with each and every one of you, Councilor Breeden, Councilor Campbell, Councilor Arroyo, Councilor Flynn, Councilor Sabi George, and you, Madam Chair. Prior to being elected to the City Council, I was actively involved in economic development. And one of the things that we did was to develop that two-story office building on Warren Street. When I was with the Circle Venture Capital Fund, later the Greater Roxbury Development Corporation. That took cooperation on part of all levels of government, as well as some equity, and resulted in the involvement of Cruz Construction Company, Stalin Lee Architects, and other African-American developers. Boston's a very exciting place. Boston sets the example. When Boston decided to withdraw financial resources from businesses involved in South Africa, other cities, states, and the federal government followed. So we have an opportunity to change the existing dynamic where we have very few people of color participating in the Boston economy in a meaningful way. And there are a number of things we can do. Certainly, we have a great experience with the linkage program in the city of Boston. As we redevelop downtown and other sections of the city of Boston, we should keep in mind the ability to establish a set-aside so that Boston will not only have a so-called European flavor, but it also has a Latino flavor, it has an African flavor, it has a Haitian flavor, and indigenous flavor as well. We must be all-inclusive. And I believe that Boston holds a unique place in this country. We can incorporate African-American and Latino and Asian and Latino businesses in the redevelopment of the Faneuil Hall market. Part of that rebranding may in fact require changing the name, but at least we have to ensure that Boston, which is majority people of color, ensure that that's reflected in the revisioning of our economy in the Seaport District, in Faneuil Hall area, as well as on Newberry Street.
I think one thing, Madam Chair, one thing that we encounter with the increasing cost of land out here in our district and the incredible development costs, we're finding that the retail spaces that are being created are really beyond the reach of any of our small businesses, any of our local small businesses. And one issue we talk to developers about is actually the way we would have affordable housing. We also talk about affordable retail, but we're not really reaching critical mass on that yet. So that's just something that we're thinking about out here in Allston Brighton.
Shagun, do you want to say, I know you've been really, leaning in and pushing around access and equity and all that. So any words of wisdom you can bestow on us?
Well, I certainly have words, but I'll leave it to the councilors to determine if there's wisdom in them. But I want to thank you, Councilor, for hosting this hearing, and to all of the councilors who are joining us for this important conversation. And definitely want to thank the advocates who have allowed for this conversation to happen. I know that there's a particular focus on Faneuil Hall, but because of that spotlight, there's now a greater intentionality about looking at all of the places in Boston where Black and brown businesses are not represented. We make up 54% of the city, and it's not just Roxbury, Dorchester, Mattapan, and Hyde Park that we shop at. And so it's going to be important that we're able to access storefronts and businesses that reflect our communities everywhere we go. And then also, not supposed to do this in the hearing, but I do want to credit Councilor Yancey. We're not often in spaces together, but certainly me being here would not be possible without the counselor, especially to be able to talk about this issue. So I want to thank you. And also, I'm going to invite Jada at some point to talk on this issue, because I know that through her company, smaller micro businesses are an important part of this conversation. And so it's important when we're talking about small businesses that we're clear about what types of businesses and the size of businesses we're talking about, because micro businesses tend to be lumped into small businesses. And so we want to, disaggregate that and make sure that we're helping each category. I have a bunch of recommendations that me and my team put together that I'm just going to throw out there, and then we'll see what sticks and where things fall. But I'll just go down the list here. So, one of our recommendations is to explore the use of tax credits and other incentives for commercial property owners in high volume neighborhoods who agree to negotiate affordable long-term leases with Black and other POC owned businesses. In fact, in a survey that we're conducting of our businesses right now, the number one issue for just about everybody, about 90% of people that responded, said that the high cost of rent or paying bills is their number one hurdle when they're thinking of how they're going to not only survive the pandemic, but get beyond the post-pandemic reality. Another recommendation is following a model established by the city of Taunton, not that far away, where they established a commercial rental rebate program that for newer businesses looking to move into a vacant storefront, they actually provide 2 years of rental reimbursement of assistance to businesses, and it's graduated over that period of time to kind of wean them off of that support, but it removes a huge overhead hurdle that a lot of businesses face, and especially when we're thinking about, I know Kevin brought up and another sub brought up the wealth gap here in the city. There's also an investment gap in our businesses. So on a national level, McKinsey put out a report last year that showed that white businesses have access to startup capital of $107,000, and Black entrepreneurs have access to $35,000 of startup capital. And when we're thinking of that $8, that's not a whole lot to get from your friends and family to help start your business. So another is, so thinking of our banks, banks play an important role here too, where a lot of small businesses reach out for loans in order to be able to rent out some of these properties. And so the city can use its bully pulpit and its leverage to ensure that banks are providing more loans and lines of credit to our businesses at lower rates. So I know that there was an effort to try to use that leverage on banks and other lending institutions by shifting city deposits to banks that are actually in line with the city's with their equity standards. And so would love to not only get an update, but see how we can support the city in continuing that process. The city can also work with or partner with universities and hospitals and other anchor institutions that may own commercial property in high volume commercial neighborhoods to encourage or require that they provide affordable leases to our businesses as part of their pilot commitments. This is a thing that I think Jada can speak to, ensuring that we're utilizing some of these large commercial spaces as incubators for micro businesses. So as Councilor Braden just stated, a lot of these commercial properties, these retail spaces are inaccessible to smaller or micro businesses because the rents are astronomical. But one thing that we can do is work with property owners to reimagine what those spaces look like so that we can fit a number of businesses in that space that are not paying exorbitant fees, but are actually breaking up those fees. And that when these businesses reach a place where they are earning a considerable profit, they're able to move to another space where they can't afford to be there and not go bankrupt, which a lot of our businesses do. And then finally, decision makers, I know actually Councillor Flynn mentioned that this is budget season, and this is a really important time to talk about this important issue. And so just thinking of how we're allocating our spending for staff and resources, Natalia mentioned that this may not be a funded area that they focus on, but they do focus on it. And so it's important that we are investing more in departments like Natalia's to ensure that we have the necessary staff and resources to support our businesses in doing all this. So those are our list of recommendations. So I'll save you the speech, but I appreciate the opportunity.
So just what has happened here is that we skipped the line and let Shagun do his answers and Q&A and his presentation all at once. So we have just bundled everything up to that. And so thank you, because what that does is set the stage and provides the counselors who still have have questions to be able to incorporate some of the things that you shared with us. So I'm glad that it all kind of worked out. So Councillor Campbell, you now have the floor.
Thank you, Councilor Mejia, and thank you, of course, all the panelists. And I actually appreciate Shagun's ideas and think all of them we should be running with. And when we think about the federal dollars that we're getting with respect to COVID, this is a way to create new opportunities, to provide that capital, to provide that investment, to help businesses that are facing displacement too. We think about Nubian Notion, some of these businesses that grew over time and are no longer here. How might we be able to use some of these federal dollars creatively to activate some of these ideas now and get the private sector and philanthropy to match the city of Boston, for example, their investment in these endeavors? And the last thing I will say, it's less of a question, it's a question, is do we have any data on race and ethnicity breakdown for business owners in commercial centers? So Seaport, Newbury Street, that would be useful to know. I'm not sure if we have any. I know that there was some cited, of course, by some of the panelists, but just curious if we have any of that data, if we track any of that.
Natalia, would you be able to address that?
Yeah, I'm happy to respond to Councillor Campbell's both of those points. I think the first point around displacement and CARES Act funding, that was exactly what the Commercial Rent Relief Fund was intended to do, was really to build a relationship and a bridge between landlords and property owners. Of the $3.4 million that went out, I can say that 58% are minority owned, 44% are women owned, and 57% are immigrant owned. So our focus has been very specific on making sure that those funds that are coming from the federal government are directly targeting, our minority, immigrant, and women-owned businesses across the city. So that's the first point. I think to your second point, there isn't comprehensive data around business owner race or ethnicity or gender, frankly, across the city, because it is not part of the way we collect business certification and registration for businesses happens at the state level, and those questions aren't asked. The only real data that we have around that is the certified business directory, which again doesn't usually or typically discuss or capture the information on retail businesses. And so I wish we had that data. I think it would be really helpful. We collect it kind of anecdotally through our Main Streets program and relationships with other business associations, but we don't have a comprehensive list of the demographics of businesses across the city.
Well, happy to push for that, because I do think it's difficult, obviously, to solve for the problem, without that data. So would love to push for that, Councilor Mejia, of course, through you as the chair. And then lastly, I would love, to the extent we can get a breakdown of how the federal dollars were spent, to whom, for what purpose, would be really helpful. Because there are businesses that still are complaining, of course, about displacement, the lack of capital, the lack of investment, how difficult it is to get space. And then my last question is, how are we as a city pushing not just the private sector, but our hospitals, our higher ed institutions, and other larger institutions in the city to not just open up their supplier relationships, but to diversify their businesses. What are we doing what levers are we pulling? How are we pushing these institutions? You know, who are their lawyers? Who are their accountants? Not just who's providing the food, the laundry, and everything else. Just curious, what are we doing as a city on that perspective? That's my last question. Thank you, Council Mejia.
That's a great question, Natalia.
Well, I don't have the specific information. I know that Selena Barrios Milner, Chief of Equity, has been working on that in the Equity and Inclusion team for a long time, working through partnerships with some of the larger institutions around, encouraging them to use the Certified Business Directory. So I think we would have to have a separate conversation about that, because I think, you know, that is really important. And I would love to work with this group around the data, because I do think that is a really significant, important part. And then your other point was just around the breakdown of CARES Act funding. I can't speak to the breakdown of the whole city, unfortunately, at least not on this call. But I can speak towards the funds that have come through my office, and I'm happy to prepare that and share that with this group. I know we did that back in, I think in like October or November, we did a presentation to the City Council on the breakdown of our funding. I'm happy to do an update for this group.
Thank you. And Senator Wilkerson, I believe you said you may have information in terms of where data may live, or at least that's.
Yes, Madam Chairman, I had to wait to get put online. But here's the fact. This is not rocket science because it's fairly new. There is one Black barber on the Seaport. There was one Latino restaurant which was run out of the Seaport because their owners continued to charge them rent during the COVID, and the residents in the building did not want them there because they did not like the Latin music, period. All right. I love the fact that Councilor Campbell asked that question about commercial centers. 1 year ago, there was one Black business in the public market that is highly subsidized by the city of Boston. And I don't think she's there. She's not there anymore. That was Ivy Lawson, because she is now relocated. The fact is that the city of Boston has tremendous power and leverage on how what you extract from people that are given city money. And so when you talk about the institutions, I have one last comment. Northeastern University, in their 10-year master plan, every time they re-up it, they make commitments to the city of Boston in order to get the approval from BBDA. If you would look, I would really implore this council, and you in particular, to request a copy of their master plan community agreements for the last 2 decades, which have been 05, 15, and they're doing one now. Routine, they make lots of promises. One of those promises in 15, I think 05, was to fund some commercial Black business and Latino business commercial activity in Lower Roxbury. They did nothing, and there is no consequence when they do nothing, because the city does not follow up on that. So I just want to implore this council. You have power. When people come looking for approval, when they look for licensing, you ought to be able, and you can legally, using that more than a bully pulpit, it is fact power to extract commitment, and then you have to enforce it. And so there's no study. You don't need a study. There's one Black barber in the Seaport. There is no Latino restaurant because that restaurant was run out of the Seaport. There is no Black or Latino businesses in the public market, and there are no Black or Latino businesses in Faneuil Hall. Those are our commercial centers. And for that, you have to do something.
Thank you. Thank you for that. I'm going to move on to Councilor Arroyo.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And thank you so far for the statements made. I actually have a question I'm going to direct to Councilor Yancey. I know you've been part of these fights for a very long time. And so I just wanted, if you have maybe a few places, a few threads where you are working on something on the council that you think can be picked up again, or a couple places where you think we can use sort of the power of the council to wield these kind of results that we're looking for, I'd love to give you the platform now to sort of give voice to those.
Thank you very much, Councilor Arroyo, and I certainly appreciate the issues that have been raised. I agree with Senator Wilkerson. The city of Boston has tremendous powers. Nothing can be developed in the city of Boston without the consent of the city, either through the zoning process or what used to be called the BRA process or BPDA. We have tremendous power. So one of the issues that I've consistently raised is what is the not just the environmental impact study of these developments, but what's the economic impact study, particularly focusing on the issue of economic disparities that exist among the various people in the city of Boston. The other issue has to do with asking a basic question. Does the city of Boston operate for the benefit of the residents of Boston, or are we simply an economic machine for people who don't even live here? And I think that's a very important issue. You know, as we look at various proposals that come before the, what used to be the BRA or what comes before the Zoning Board of Appeals, we have to ask the question about economic justice and equity. So I would certainly insist that in that analysis that we ask, well, how many people of color are on your construction site? How many people of color own your subs? How many people of color and women are really participating in the economic activity of the city of Boston? And as we take a look at Faneuil Hall, which the city owns, we have tremendous authority in terms of negotiating maybe new lease agreements to ensure that certain percentage of the space is reserved or set aside for businesses. So those are some of the issues I would be looking at, as well as asking the same questions that some of the other analysts have asked in terms of what type of staffing, what type of budget do we have really to implement these programs? How much staff does the Department of Equity have to monitor the activities of this corporation known as the City of Boston, which spends upwards of $4 billion a year when you include federal funding? So I would take a very close look at it, and yes, conduct it similar to an audit process. I mean, it's all well and good to come before the City Council to ask for support of this budget, but after the council approves the budget, what type of follow through do we have to ensure that they're living up to the commitments made through the budget documents?
Thank you, Councilor Yancey. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Okay, thank you, Councilor Arroyo. So I'm gonna move on to Councilor Flynn. You now have the floor.
Thank you, Councilor Mejia, for your leadership, important leadership on this issue. Maybe through the chair, I would like to ask, maybe similar to the comments or question from Councilor Campbell, we have many Main Street programs in the city. I'm just wondering, and I'd like to know of the Main Street programs that receive technical assistance from the city and some limited funding, I think. But how many, or can we at least do a study of the number of women-owned, minority-owned, or immigrant-owned businesses in particular Main Streets? I wonder if that information were available. I think that might be helpful. One, and then is the city of Boston considering, and I would like for them to do this, I've advocated for it, but the small businesses that are struggling right now that might owe fees to the city, whether it's restaurant related fees or taxes, are we able to work with people on property tax related issues to give them an opportunity to continue in that small business, especially if it's owned by a woman or if it's owned by a person of color or an immigrant? I'm just curious on those two particular issues, what we could do. And as I mentioned in my opening statement, I would like to see as we go forward in this budget process, what we're funding to support these businesses.
Talia?
Yeah, so as far as Boston Main Street's data, again, we have really rough data and anecdotal data that indicates that we do have a large percentage of minority, immigrant, and women-owned businesses in our neighborhoods, as in particular in the Boston Main Streets programs, like within those districts. I think it's a real challenge for us because we cannot legally require people to tell us their race or how they identify. There, I think there is an opportunity for us to work on ways of capturing that data, but I am not aware of any process outside of the certification process that really actually can legally establish kind of that certification. And so, I look to this group and happy to take any suggestions, and I'll bring it back to my colleagues to see how we can really talk through and work through that data collection piece. I think as far as taxes go and businesses that owe the city any amount of money in back taxes or any other debts, I think that the city has been very flexible to work with people on payment plans and identifying ways to mitigate those costs. Especially during the pandemic, we've waived, as a city, we've waived just for restaurants alone, we've leveraged $26 million to waive fees and remove permits and permit fees and things like that to ensure that businesses can partake and can survive. I think while some of those owed debts might be there, we're more than willing to work with businesses, but that's not really on my department or my team to say. We'd have to talk to administration and finance around what waiving or what doing anything about those owed debts might look like.
Thank you, Natalia, and thank you, Councilor Mejia.
Thank you, Councilor Flynn. Wow, 47 seconds left. Good job. All right, so I know Councilor Sabi George, hopefully you're still here with us, so would love to give you the floor. She left. Okay, thank you for that. Okay, so I just have a few questions, and then would love to invite Mia and Jada into the conversation. So Natalia, we are working with any particular businesses? Are we working with any particular business association neighborhoods in like Newberry Street, the Seaport, Faneuil Hall, Marketplace to create venues for Black and Brown businesses, just BIPOC businesses in general? Like, if so, can you just share with us what that work looks like? And then I'm starting my own timer here, y'all, because I'm holding myself accountable to this too. And then this question is for Councilor Yancey or Shagun. I'm curious of what you think the city could be doing more to not only bring more established BIPOC business owners into these spaces, but to also support first-time entrepreneurs as well. So those are just two quick questions.
Well, I think the city can begin by establishing a program of providing some finance for some of these businesses. When I was working with community development corporations, we had an equity fund. And there's no reason why the city cannot establish an equity fund to provide some financing for businesses if they need it for working capital, if they need it for leasehold improvements, whatever the case may be. The federal government established that program in the 1960s that was used to leverage investments in many businesses throughout the country, but particularly within the city of Boston. And I believe that that type of innovative program in the 21st century could go a long way to including people who historically have been left out of the local economy. The mechanisms can be provided, working not only through Main Streets, but through the BPDA and similar efforts. So the city can actually become part owner of some of these businesses by using some equity investments.
Thank you for that. Shagun?
Yeah, I just want to add to that. That's a absolutely important and fantastic recommendation. And I know that on the transition committee, there was a lot of conversation about the city, backing up that recommendation, that the city not only should establish that type of fund, but also partner with organizations like the Foundation for Business Equity and others who have created that model to do so, because it shouldn't just be city money that's going towards something like that. This is an opportunity for the city to also leverage its relationships with the private sector to compel them, all these folks who are saying, we support Black businesses and we're gonna set aside $1 billion. And then a year later, we have no idea what the impact is, or if that money has actually been dispersed, or if it was just a way for them to repackage what they were already doing. So it's an opportunity, I think, for the city to pool all of that money together, and then also I do have to give the city credit, and please someone let the secretary know that I'm saying something positive about the administration, because last year when the pandemic was really absolutely decimating our community, I have to give credit for the application process for getting access to the grant process, where it was very clear, if you have 5 or less employees, you get this much. If you have, et cetera, and they tried to remove as many barriers as possible. Essentially, you had to prove that you existed as a human being to get access to that money, and they made sure that lots of minority business owners got access to that. So as we're, so again, just a +1 to the idea of setting up that fund, merging those efforts with existing efforts, because a lot of us are also raising money to impact our businesses. So it's better if we're pooling it. And then also, as we're thinking about some of these, what industries we're investing in, just going to be important that, there is an emerging industry called cannabis. And so we need to make sure too that we are removing barriers. And I know the city's doing some work on this, but ensuring that you're listening to cannabis activists to remove barriers as they are looking to move into storefronts to start up their businesses.
Thank you for that. And I have 1 minute and 6 seconds left for you, Natalia, to answer the question in regards to the level of engagement with business associations outside, like Newberry Street, the Seaport, and Faneuil Hall. Can you talk to us a little bit about that?
Yeah, I mean, I think we work with business associations around what their vision for their districts are, and help connect businesses. Again, our role is not to indicate to a private property owner who they need to put in that space. All we can really do is make those connections. And as I mentioned, we've been doing that kind of informally since during my tenure in this role. It has really been about making those direct pipeline and conversations. We've had open vacancies, fairs to invite property owners to connect with and meet business owners, and we'll continue to do those types of meet and greets. I think it's much more challenging for us to make any direct lines other than those introductions. I also want to just urge this group and all the panelists that we don't know what we don't know. So if there are business owners out there that are looking for space, actively looking for space, and haven't yet connected with us, I urge you all to help connect them directly to our team, so that when we get those, I talk to developers through the BPDA all the time. I talk to, property owners all the time. And when they reach out to us, we, start to make those introductions and those connections, which is really what I've heard from landlords and property owners. The hardest thing for them is to really connect with and meet business owners that fit the parameters of what they want in their space. And so again, we've been doing this informally. I have been talking to colleagues for some time about how we can, formalize it a little bit more. But it is a really delicate thing, because even, something like a fund, we can't legally prioritize any one business over another unless they are certified, right? And so that certification process is a really important key here in indicating where funds and where resources can go. But I urge you all to know that our office works really intensely with the business owners that come to us. And a lot of those, the majority of those, I will say, are minority, Black owned, immigrant owned, women owned, et cetera. And that's where our commitment is.
Thank you for that. And I'll just say, and I'm going to move on to the next panel, is just to, in terms of transition, I think it's important for us to know a number of things. And this is what I'm hearing loud and clear from some of the folks that have spoken, is that as the council, we definitely have a lot more power than we have been led to believe. And I think that enforcement and that accountability is really an opportunity for us to say, if you're going to do business in the city of Boston, this is what it's going to look like. And there is a way for us to say and push for some equity funding to say, we're gonna incentivize you to put some dollars into this equity fund if you want to do business here. I think we have to start being more aggressive about like how we move if we're really serious about that accountability. And Natalia, the good thing is that you can use loudmouth like me to push on that, right? And to drive that conversation, right? Because I think that these times require us to really push these folks who are establishing their businesses and leaving so many people of color out. And I also think in terms of the associations that exist outside, the Newberry Street and Seaport and Faneuil Hall, is that they need to also have some level of accountability of what that looks like. And maybe they need a little bit of training and some coaching in terms of how they create more inclusive spaces for everybody. So with that, I'm going to ensure that we have some time and space for other folks. I'm going to move on to the next panel. Shagun and Councilor Yancey, you guys already kind of been brought into the mix. So just so you know, you already kind of like did your welcoming remarks without even realizing it. But I'm going to focus on Jada. I know you have Jada Turner from, and I also know that Nia has joined us as well. So I'm going to have Jada go first, and then we'll go to Nia.
Hi, good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for having me, Counselor. My name is Jada Turner. I'm the founder and managing director of Black Owned Boss, organization that was founded in March of 2019 to highlight and lift Black owned businesses, places, spaces in the greater Boston area. And the work of the organization business has grown significantly over the last year and a half to expand on various opportunities in creating visibility, and that looks like a number of different things that we have already talked about a little bit around retail incubation, around access to space, around kind of technical assistance and kind of welcoming and creating community, which is one thing that I kind of want to really touch on that I think would be important to this conversation, is creating a space where people feel welcome, even if the spaces exist in the Faneuil Hall, even if they know how to access them. Some people may not even go there just because maybe I don't want to be the only person there. Maybe my community won't come here. Maybe they won't feel welcome. So I think that there are two barriers, whether it's access to capital, whether it's access to other resources, but there is kind of that brand barrier that a number of these spaces have, whether it's the Seaport or Faneuil Hall. And something that I've been working on is creating space of community and bringing those spaces. So having kind of these retail activations to activate these spaces where communities are coming, they know that they're going to find people that look like them, whether it's for special events, whether it's for a sustained retail activation, they know that they're going to find businesses that look like them and people that look like them when they come to these spaces and inherently make themselves more comfortable to go. So I think that having those spaces is great. And Shagun really touched on it about reimagining these vacancies that exist in these commercial spaces. But in addition to that is that there's a lot of work and prep and management and things that go into if you're overseeing a space like that where there are various businesses within it. So ways that the city can invest in that, whether it's the people that are managing those spaces or incentivizing the private commercial spaces to lease to those type of organizations to consult on those kind of projects. I think that would be key because I think having somebody that has the technical assistance that they can provide providing and breaking down those barriers to entry are really important. And when we're talking about these more affluent or more kind of uniform areas, there are spaces where maybe you don't feel like you'll fit in because you don't have the money for a brand sign that looks like the people next door to you. So kind of breaking down those barriers and providing more specific resources, whether it's for marketing, whether it's for branding, and whether it's for kind of like coaching and mentorship.
Thank you. Thank you so very much. I'm so glad that your voice is in this space. I see Natalia, you have your hand up.
I just want to quickly respond, Jada. Thank you for the work you've done. It's been really amazing to see Black-owned Boss grow. And I know that we have definitely referred to your list lots of times when we're trying to do outreach to folks, as well as, you know, obviously as we've been just kind of growing the support systems. I want to just make sure folks know here, because when I want to talk about our technical assistance program very briefly, as well as our Restore and Design program, which is exactly what you were just talking about. We offer absolutely free resources to business owners in marketing, in design, in legal, in accounting, basically you name it, and we have a provider that is an expert, and we pair businesses up for free to that business owner. So those resources do exist in my shop. And then the other piece is we actually have a program called Restore and Design, which is signage and facade improvement program, where we offer not just the actual design support from an actual professional designing and marketing company, but we actually help business owners pay for through grants for those signs to go up, because that is a huge indicator of, you know, of value and investment in our community. And so our team has been running that program for 15 plus years. So again, I urge folks who work directly with business owners to connect to our team. They can just simply start by emailing smallbiz@boston.gov, and we will work with them one-on-one. Every single business is different. There's no like one size fits all model. So if we don't know you're out there as a business owner, we can't help you. And, you know, if you don't come to us, we don't know that you need us. So we do a lot of outreach, but would love the support that you all have there to connect them with us.
And so I just wanted to bring a point that was shared with me by Senator Wilkerson. And it's a real good point in terms of just kind of really thinking about what's the point of, like, when we think about putting these businesses through time costs of certification, when the certification means that only less than 0.5% are a city business. So it's just something I think that the whole contracting process here needs to be evaluated. We're not going to have it in this conversation, but it is important for us to recognize the rigmarole that we put businesses through, and that there is really at the end of the tunnel, no hope oftentimes, right? And I also think that there's something very important for us to keep in mind as we continue with this conversation, is that when you look at foot traffic, when you look at the number of people, the tourists that are coming through, we're shutting out communities of color from really prospering their businesses if we're just regulating them to certain areas, and if we're not really being intentional about creating space, regardless. And you know, Jada, I do appreciate the point about people feeling comfortable in certain spaces. We should, the city of Boston, we should be able to feel comfortable in any space that we are in. And let me tell you, I grew up in Boston. I went to New York, and I felt comfortable in any little nook and cranny in the city of New York. And it wasn't until I came back to Boston that I started realizing how segregated we were. But I had to leave in order to experience that, to come back and see that when it comes to businesses, we are it's like redlining. We're relegated to certain areas as though that those are the only spaces that we're supposed to thrive in. And I think foot traffic is also a really telltale sign in terms of dollars and cents, in terms of really looking at data and how we're not profiting. And so, Natalia, I see you have your hand up again. Would you want to talk again?
I was just gonna say that I urge for that conversation that we bring in Chief Barrios Milner to have that conversation, because that is literally what the supplier diversity program that she's been working really hard to get built out is all about. And as we talk about retail storefronts and what that means for certification is a totally different issue, because they're not there. It's like apples and oranges. So I just want to be make sure to bring her in next time to be part of that conversation.
Thank you for that. And I'm going to move on to Nia Grace, who is also here as one of our panelists. Would love to open up the space. I know as a restaurant owner, you can bring a lot of perspective to this conversation. So Nia, you now have the floor.
Thank you, Councilor Mejia, and good afternoon to everyone present. I just wanted to, really just think about this a little bit more and coming as a business owner, and I can appreciate the advocacy that comes on our behalf. But as a business owner, one of the things that was brought up, you talked about the certification process, and we understand that it's illegal to maybe ask us to provide or force someone to provide demographic information. But I think that upon me creating my business, if there was at least a question that said, would I want to be considered to be certified as a minority business or women-owned enterprise? Just check that box off, right? And then somebody from the department, somebody from licensing, somebody can give me a call later and follow up to say, hey, I saw that you were interested in. And so I think that we're really kind of doing ourselves a disservice by not trying to gather that information at the top. As Natalia, you could probably understand, trying to get data after the fact is really hard to do so. So I think that we should maybe consider it that way. I also want to, just think about this a little bit more in terms of Faneuil Hall and the seaport, and truly Boston or Massachusetts epicenters of travel and tourism. We see more than 18 million visitors a year, maybe not last year because of COVID, but we see more than 18 million visitors a year. I think about Faneuil Hall and how it has 146 different business operations that you can have there, 49 shops, 18 restaurants and pubs, 35 quick service eateries, and 44 push carts. So out of 146, to Diane Wilkerson's point, we don't actually need a study to figure out how many of those businesses are Black owned. When we go down to the seaport, there are, I think, about 6 to 7 developers for almost all of the seaport. We don't necessarily need any, data to let us know that of them, we only had La Casa de Pedro, and now we only have a barber down on the seaport. I think about parcel 9 that's being constructed and maybe will be finished by this fall or almost finished this fall at the corner of Quincy Market. Who in their charter, it had that information about, what percentage of the construction team needed to be hired for this or that. But then I also saw a piece of their charter that said they had to have improvements for the Freedom Trail, that had to have particular improvements for Blackstone Street. Then I saw that they had to have dedicated space for the Haymarket Association, yet no mention of, what kind of space should be given to BIPOC businesses. Then I think about, if I am even considering this space, I'm not even on the list to know about it. And maybe you're not on the list to know about it either. But when it does finally get to me, I find out that the rents there are upwards of $75 per square foot. I find out that if I were to go into a new generation space, I would need to spend at least $550 to $650 per square foot. We're talking about a $3 million build out on anything that's just 4,000 square feet. And so I think about all those things, and I try to figure out, how do we make those connections? Because I looked at this charter, that this business, to Councilor Yancey's point, are we sitting here trying to line the pockets of the people that do not live here anymore? Because parcel 9 is in fact headed up by a company, a family-owned company out of New York, based off of Madison Avenue. And, that owner was able to leave that company, go to another company and just make the same amount of money. And I'm really just trying to figure out, can I even get into a space that I know for sure is seeing most of those 18 million visitors that are traffic into our city. And they are not necessarily coming to my neighborhood of Roxbury, or going to Nubian Square, or going to Mattapan. And so I guess I'm really trying to figure out, what can the city do in that same kind of language where they laid out different factors to get their streets fixed? What can you do for our businesses to actually get into those spaces?
What can we do? Natalia, those are some really good questions. And I think to your point in terms of who is invited to the Zoom, I think the next cohort of folks that I definitely want to call upon is the BPDA. They need to be here to answer some of these questions, because some of this is around planning and development and thinking and being really intentional. And I also think, to your point, Selena should also be involved. But I think that Mia asked some really good questions in terms of what we can do. So I'm just curious what that looks like from a small business lens.
Yeah, I mean, I think with existing resources, existing programming that we have, we need more of these small businesses to come to us so that we can help them prepare to be competitive for some of those spaces. We as a city are trying to figure out how we help build that bridge and that connection. So, again, I urge, folks to get us connected directly. We have lots of resources available for small businesses that are looking to grow and expand their business footprint beyond Roxbury, Dorchester, Mattapan into those high traffic commercial spaces. I also just want to note that I love the idea of capturing more information up front when businesses certify. I do want to just remind folks that there's lots of different certifications, one of which is the business certificate that goes through the city clerk's office, as well as obviously the more formalized certification process to be indicated as a minority or a woman-owned business or veteran-owned, or et cetera. And so I will look into that, absolutely. And then I also might say that, this is a situation where I think we need to bring some of those big companies into the dialogue as well, because even, in situations where the city doesn't have legal, legal authority to require any type of number. Some landlords are, small time landlords that have one property, one space, and they have leases. These are legal contracts, right? So I think it's really about looking at where those vacancies are. And unfortunately, or I guess both fortunately and unfortunately, the total vacancy number, the vacancy percentage in Boston is actually really low on a national level. And in Boston, it's less than 3% of all spaces are vacant. And therefore, it also does then limit the amount of space that that small business owners can go into. We see more vacancies, and I talked about this on the last hearing. We see more vacancies in our neighborhood districts, but what we're talking about here is expanding beyond the neighborhoods. And so I think there has to be a little bit of that balancing act too, because we as buildings come into the pipeline, I think there's a lot that we can do to work with the BPDA and other folks around getting businesses set up to go into newly built spaces. But there's a lot more limitations on the already built environment.
Okay, so I'm just curious, and I don't want to belabor the point because we do definitely need to move on to public testimony. But to Nia's point about the fact that there is really no language in terms of how we're building with BIPOC folks in mind or creating space, what can we do more immediately? Because I'm all about like, what can we do right now? And how can we change through a policy, a protocol, or procedure, or even a program, right? At this point, we're like just hungry to get things moving. And so I'm just curious, what opportunities exist that we can continue to explore about holding a certain percentage? Like this zone is going to have X amount of BIPOC businesses. Can we do that? I mean, if we're supposed to be the city of trying to build equity, we need to really think about what that looks like, even if it's just with the numbers, like X amount of businesses will be set aside for BIPOC entrepreneurs.
Yeah, I can't really speak to the zoning code or the zoning laws. I do think that that's a conversation with folks who are experts in that space and about whether or not something like that is possible. I know that there has been a lot of effort around working with developers and through the community process around making some of those commitments up front, but I can't speak to those details.
All right, well, then I think that this definitely leads me to believe that this is just part one of many conversations, right? And then I think bringing in some more folks who can answer that, because I think we're onto something here. At the very least, we've gotten some really great solutions in terms of how we're going to move the work forward. And I think we need to continue the dialogue so that we can get some questions to Nia. I think that you brought some really good things for us to think about. And I'm curious, before we end and bring it over to our testimony, wanted to know if you had any other reflections or things that you wanted to share, Nia, while you still have the floor.
Well, I appreciate that. Like I get it, we have to get to that point where we can find the solutions, and that's why we're here. But again, speaking for my particular industry and knowing that 47% of the restaurant industry employ minorities, that's Black, Asian, Hispanic, that's what we employ. And 40% of the entire restaurant industry owners are in fact minorities, people of color. And so I think that when I think about these areas that are highlighted and promoted, and I can appreciate the new campaign for an all-inclusive Boston, and I can appreciate the Greater Boston Convention and Visitors Bureau's efforts as well. But I just know that if there was just one business that was sitting in the middle of, let's just say Mattapan, that just had that corridor food quick service mart in Faneuil Hall, they probably wouldn't need multiple venues. We probably wouldn't need that. And so I really want to figure out, how do we have those? How do you broach those conversations with landlords? Because a large part of it is we just don't have the same social circles. And so when we come to the city, it is not necessarily for a financial handout, although we do want to figure out how do we set finances aside to make sure that we can get ahead. But I'm definitely coming to you because I know the landlord. I know whoever the people are, the property managers, etc. Help us make those introductions. I'm telling you today that myself, as well as at least 15 other restaurateurs, definitely would like a second venue or a third venue or a fourth venue in areas that are totally populated by tourism and other things. That is factual on the record. And so how do we get there? And I'm willing to be a part of that, obviously.
Yeah, and I think we have a mandate right now to maybe even, I'm all about metrics and how do we, measurable outcomes, right? So if there aren't any now, then what can we do over the next year to increase it by maybe 3 or 4%, or whatever the percentage is, that sounds right. But I do think that there needs to be some sort of commitment to doing that work. And I think, Natalia, maybe you and I can talk offline. You could give me some names of other folks that need to be for the part 2 of this conversation, because I do think that there is a sense of urgency, and now more than ever, we can't be left behind. And I see that Councilor Yancey has his hand up, and I'd like to give you the floor.
Now, just very briefly, in response to Nia's very eloquent presentation, the City of Boston happens to be the landlord of Faneuil Hall. And I think an initial step would be to take an inventory of all the property owned or controlled by the city, take a look at the lease agreements, and use its leverage as the landlord to ensure that we create the space for other businesses. And I believe that we should have a decent law department that can work with the city council as you put together some new legislation, some ordinances to establish a policy that Boston is just not rhetorically going to be an all-inclusive city, but in reality use the city's real estate ownership of facilities like the Faneuil Hall to ensure that we do open up, so that we know that visitors coming to the city of Boston of all races and nationalities spend the money here. Some of the money, hopefully a decent proportion of the money, can come back into the communities of color that have been deliberately excluded from many of these venues. But we are the landlord, so city government has to step up.
That's right. Thank you. Thank you for that reminder that we do have more power than we've been led to believe. And I think that this is our opportunity to lean into that power and come back to the community with some really specific action steps. And I think I would love to have a steering committee of some of the wisest people that were here today to really lean into this and come back with some real clear, and even an ordinance or something that we can codify into law. At this point, we should be done talking about it, right? We're done with the conversation about the conversation. So I think now it's time for some real serious action, and I'm looking forward to collaborating with you all to move the work forward. So with that, I just would like to, I believe that Councilor Breeden, you're the other last councilor standing, and I wanted to see if you had any other questions before we open it up to public testimony.
Oh, I'm the last one standing. Well, that's good news. Thank you very much. This has been a really great conversation. I really hope we can take some steps to change the landscape and make it more accessible to our Black and brown and minority owned businesses and our woman owned businesses. So I look forward to continuing the conversation. I don't have any further questions. I'd be delighted to. I have to jump off for another meeting, but thank you to the panelists and thank you to all the folks who've tuned in to testify today. And thank you, Madam Chair, for your leadership. Talk to you soon.
Yeah, thank you. And I also would like to thank our panelists. And Natalia, I know that you stayed a little bit longer than you were anticipated, and it really means a lot to those who are here today, to have your ear, to have your time, and to have you also leading in. We see you as a partner in this work, and really looking forward to bringing the work forward. And I wanted to give our panelists just a sincere gratitude, and to my Chief of Policy and Communication, Jacob DeBlaycourt, who has done an amazing job getting us all here, and keeps us well organized and keeps me on time. And so I just wanted to thank Jacob and also the central staff for all their hard work. Those who are behind the scenes never get their love, and I just want you to know how much I appreciate all of your hard work in putting this together, and to Kevin Peterson too, for your leadership and leaning in and really helping to work with us on creating space for us to have real conversations about what this is going to look like for all of our people. So with that, I'd love to be able to open it up for public testimony. Just want to be super mindful, y'all. We only got 2 minutes each person, and I got the power of the mute. And I just want to remind everybody, we're here to talk about small businesses, not just in Faneuil Hall, across the city of Boston, because we need to be everywhere. So with that, I'd love to be able to open it up to public testimony. And I will ask Carrie if I can get your help with these public testimonies. I know I have Alcida Robinson, Jazz Daughton, Charles Mentos, and Linda Bessomo, if we could start with them first. Thank you all.
Thank you, Councilor Mejia. Before I state my public testimony, I'd really like to bring us back to the reason why we're here, and the fact that Peter Faneuil was a slave trader, and to not get confused that Black people were used as human capital, and Black people need to become first. When I talk of Black people, I mean Black is the embodiment of all color, but the conversation gets watered down when we say BIPOC or minority. So thank you again for having us here. And I will submit my public testimony, but I also have two other testimonies to state. If I'm not in the time, I will state the names of the testimonies and 4 other members of our community and submit them to the committee. So Honorable Committee Chair, my name is Aziza Robinson Goodnight. I'm a super voter. I live in, and my family has been in and struggled to remain in this city for generations. I'm an educator, activist, organizer, and nonprofit leader. I am also a mother. I strive to be active in my community because I am a firm believer that whom much is given, much is expected. I am a supporter of the New Democracy Coalition. On many occasions, I have participated in protests at Faneuil Hall in order to have the name changed. A public building should not be named after a slave owner. I'm a firm believer in reparations. Boston must pay reparations to Black people. The daughters and sons of enslaved Africans and the foundational Black Americans must be compensated for the centuries of exploitation we have experienced through white supremacy. Economic violence against people of color in Boston is racism. It is the job of institutions like the City of Boston to address bias against Black people at Faneuil Hall, yet it has failed to do so. The issue of racial discrimination is important to me. It is an issue that must be addressed, especially as a new generation emerges in the City of Boston. I am very invested in urging for racial equity in Boston. I would like to see expanded opportunities for Black entrepreneurs and creatives in Boston, Faneuil Hall, and in Faneuil Hall Marketplace. Faneuil Hall and Faneuil Hall Marketplace will be a venue wherein we can begin a movement towards supporting so-called minority businesses. We're not minorities, especially in the city when we take over more than half the population. I am pleased that the council is holding this very important hearing. Racial reconciliation in Boston stands as a priority for us all. To members of the City Council, I speak on behalf of young people, a generation that makes 60% less than their parents in an economy where the cost of living is increasing higher than when our parents were raising us. Make positive change and stop avoiding work that must be done about racism. Malcolm X has said that time is on the sides of the oppressed today and is against the oppressor. Truth is on the side of the oppressed today. It is against the oppressor. You don't need anything else. Believe this to be the case regarding Faneuil Hall and the issues of racial equity in Boston. I'm aware of the struggles within the Black community, especially as they pertain to social justice. The income and wealth gap between Black, brown, and white people in Boston is alarming. Black communities lack opportunities to thrive in areas of education, public health, arts, and culture. When Black people are locked out of places like Faneuil Hall and Faneuil Hall Marketplace, art and culture advancement projects are financially and systematically pitted against each other, like Nubian Ascends and Fairmont Culture Corridor Initiative. The Black community is damaged. We all suffer from practices of discrimination. Obviously, this needs to change. Please accept this statement for public record regarding docket number 21-0148. I wish to express my serious concerns about the lack of business opportunities at Faneuil Hall and Faneuil Hall Marketplace in downtown Boston and all over the city. I'm aware of the lack of opportunities for Black entrepreneurs in Boston. My understanding is that the 143 businesses at Faneuil Hall, not one is owned by a Black person. That's less than 1%. This is disturbing reality and speaks to the persistent inequality of the city of Boston. I urge that you and your colleagues move quickly to establish enforceable policy to address the issues of economic inequality that now exists at Faneuil Hall. Please ensure that this statement is made a public record. Sincerely, Aziza Robinson. Good night. And I'll ask now how much time.
I'm trying to be really mindful of the fact that this is public testimony, but we went over. This was 5 minutes. We went over the 2-minute testimony, and the thing is that we have a timer in terms of how long our public hearings are. So I'm really trying to make sure that we get through all of the public testimonies. So, this is going to be the hardest thing for me to do, given the fact that there's so many folks that have signed up, and we want to be super mindful of central staff and the time that they have here with us. So I just want to remind everyone, we have 2 minutes for public testimony, and I'm trying to be super, super, super mindful of that. And out of courtesy, I let you go on for 5 minutes, and I just don't want to set the stage for other folks to think that that's going to be the case, because I am being held accountable to a 2-minute for public testimony. So I just want to be mindful of that.
I thank you for that, but I also would like to say that I'm submitting public testimony for Susan Acosta, Kirby Robertson, James Mackey, Elizabeth St. Degard, Elijah Perry.
Oh, so I thought you were going to say you were going to read their testimony. So you're reading their names into the record.
I actually was going at the end and was asking you how much time I had left before you interrupted me. And then I was going to tell you who I'm submitting public testimony to.
Thank you. So we'll move on to Jazz. And I'm going to set the timer again.
Hello, everyone. Hello, Councilor Mejia. Thank you very much for holding this hearing about this important matter. Learning from Aziz's testimony, I'm going to start in the reverse with submitting names for the testimony rather than reading off their letters. So the names that I would like to submit are Joseph Eubanks, Faria Ali, Erica Williams, Dolores Christopher, Farrell Cox, Carrie Mays, Brittany Merman, and Jenny Bohem Carter, in addition to Fabiola T. Fowles. So I would like to submit my testimony for the record, and I'll just read it right now. So, Honorable Committee Chair, my name is Jazz Daughton, and I live in Cambridge, Massachusetts, right across the water from Boston. And I've worked in the tourism industry of Boston for many years. I'm a supporter of the New Democracy Coalition, and I am committed to social justice and an end to racism as we know it. Creating an economic foundation for the Black community in Boston is paramount. With the tourism industry as one of Boston's major economic drivers, I'm particularly concerned about opportunities for Black people to secure jobs at all levels in this sector and the narratives that are told to tourists who visit our destination. I would like to see expanded opportunities for Black entrepreneurs in Boston, especially in highly trafficked tourist areas of the city. Faneuil Hall and the Faneuil Hall Marketplace are the top tourist destinations in Boston, and they rank among some of the top destinations in the entire nation. They should be a venue wherein we can begin a movement towards supporting minority businesses. I'm very pleased that the council is holding this meeting today, and I believe that racial reconciliation in Boston stands as a priority for us all. So I urge the City Council to organize an additional hearing to address the issue of Faneuil Hall's name, since this is not the hearing for that. But it's important to recognize that publicly owned buildings should not be named after the harmful legacy of slavery. Peter Faneuil paid for the construction of Faneuil Hall from his wealth built from the transatlantic slave trade. So we truly do need a hearing to discuss this dark legacy and to determine what name the public would accept in place of Peter Faneuil. As a member of Boston's Black community through my work in volunteerism, I'm aware of the lack of business opportunities for Black entrepreneurs. And it's my understanding that of the 143 businesses at Faneuil Hall, not one is Black owned. That's less than 1%. This is a disturbing reality, and considering that Boston is a majority BIPOC city, it speaks to persistent inequality in the city of Boston. I see that my time is up, so I would just like to submit that to the record, and you may move on. Thank you.
Thank you, Jazz. Thank you for modeling that behavior. That's exactly what we're trying to do here. And I just want to make sure that everybody has an opportunity to be heard, and deeply do appreciate both your comments and Azira's earlier comments. And that I want to make note that when we talk about minorities, there's nothing minor about us. So I think that language is really important, that we need to all challenge ourselves to how we're talking about Black folks. And so wanted to just really make that point, and do appreciate that comment made earlier. So I'm gonna move on to Charles. You know, I got the timer here.
Yeah, I got you. So what I'm gonna do first, I'm gonna follow the lead with Jazz. I'm gonna submit 9 statement documents for the record. The 9 names will be Arnice Brown, Alexander Ralimi, Bill Wright, Wise Roundtree, Toby Sackenstate, Shariah Rocker, Peter Opala, Letter, Orlando Prince Cruz, Minister Isabel Harris. So let me begin. I'm here to testify. My name is Charles Mentos. I work in Boston. I am a Boston Public School administrator. I am a voter. I am active in the community as a volunteer with the New Democracy Coalition as an advocate in the Black community. I've seen so much suffering that is linked to the lack of financial resources. I've witnessed young people graduating from school with few economic options. Creating an economic foundation for the Black community in Boston is paramount. For this reason, I am very invested in urging for racial equity in Boston. I would like to see expanded opportunities for Black entrepreneurs in Boston. Faneuil Hall and the Faneuil Hall Marketplace stand as a venue wherein we can begin a movement towards supporting so-called minority businesses and expanding the Black and brown middle class. I am pleased that the council is holding this very important hearing. Racial reconciliation in Boston stands as a priority for all of us. Please accept this statement for public recording regarding docket 210148. I wish to express my serious concerns about the lack of business opportunities at Faneuil Hall and the Faneuil Hall Marketplace in downtown Boston. As a member in the Boston's Black community, I am aware of the lack of opportunities for Black entrepreneurs in Boston. My understanding is that the 143 businesses at Faneuil Hall, not one is owned by a Black person. That's less than 1%. This is disturbing reality and speaks to persistent inequality in the city of Boston. I am aware of the struggles within Black community, especially as they pertain to social injustice. The income and wealth gap between Black and brown and white people in Boston is alarming. Black communities lack opportunities to thrive in the areas of education and public health. When Black people are locked out of places like Faneuil Hall and the Faneuil Hall Marketplace, the Black community is damaged. We all suffer from practices and discrimination. Obviously, this needs to change. I urge you in close that you and your colleagues will move quickly to establish enforceable policy to address the issues of economic inequality that now exists at Faneuil Hall. Please ensure this statement and be part of the public record. Charles Mentos, thank you.
Charles, you lucky. I let you live a little bit longer.
I appreciate it, Councilor.
No, but yes, I'm trying to be super mindful and respectful because I know everybody's coming here because they got things to say, and I know what it feels like not to be heard. So trust me that even though it goes off, I'm not putting you on mute because we got to hear all voices. So thank you.
There's also no mute in City Hall, so let's be mindful of that. If people have public statement, we have to allow.
Well, I'm just saying there's a 2-minute timer here. So anyways, let's move on. We're moving on to Trisha. Thank you, Charles. That was dope. I appreciate it.
Hello, everyone. Thank you. My name is Trisha Thomas. I live in the city of Boston. I'm a voter and a woman who happens to be Black. I'm active in my community. I'm a mother. I've raised my children to be very committed to the city of Boston. I'm very invested in urging for racial equity in Boston, as well as working towards effective and systemic change against racism. I am a product and ongoing supporter of the New Democracy Coalition. I am very proud of the work being done by Reverend Dr. Kevin Peterson. Please accept this statement for the public record regarding docket number 21-0148. I wish to express my serious concerns about the lack of business opportunities for Black and brown people at the Faneuil Hall and Faneuil Hall Marketplace. My understanding is that of the 143 businesses at Faneuil Hall, not one is owned by a Black person. Not only is this disturbing and speaks to the ongoing inequities in the city of Boston, but I want you to hear directly from me what it feels like to be a consumer in modern Boston. I'm aware of the struggles within the Black community, especially as they pertain to social justice. The income and wealth gap between Blacks and whites in Boston is just flat out disgraceful. The city of Boston has not tackled the issues around racism in the areas of healthcare, education, public safety, and racism as it relates to trauma. Black communities lack opportunities to thrive. It feels like our lives are being taken from us. It's like we're breathing, but we're not alive. When Blacks are locked out of places like Faneuil Hall and the Faneuil Hall Marketplace, the Black community is damaged. We all suffer and continue to suffer from practices of pervasive discrimination. As a constituent, I demand change. I encourage you and your colleagues to not only quickly establish enforceable policies to address the issues of economic inequalities that has been existing at Faneuil Hall, but I also urge you to take a keen look at what's been happening and what it means to be Black in the city of Boston. Please ensure that this statement be made part of the public record. Very truly yours, Trisha Thomas.
Thank you, Trisha. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yes, okay. All right, so we're moving on to Linda Bessomo. Are you with us, Linda?
So how do I, I'm sorry, how do I get on my screen?
Okay, I think you have to, I'm gonna ask you to start your video and you could just say yes to that.
Yes.
Yes, okay.
Okay,
Don't wait, let me start this all over again because, okay, go.
sorry.
Go ahead.
Okay, hi, my name is actually Sister Linda Bessomo. An individual member of the USA Anti-Racism Team of the Sisters of Notre Dame de Namur and Pax Christi USA. I want to remind this wonderful committee and thank them for this important proposal to use an anti-racist lens and to realize that it is the moral obligation of the city of Boston to look at reconciliation and reparations and accountability to people of color. So it's in that perspective that I asked this auspicious committee to move forward, and I call upon this committee to specifically look at Faneuil Hall Marketplace, as people have said before. No owned person of color business is there. And I believe that you can initiate a sustainable and open process that would prioritize applications of such business enterprises. Such action would show the city's commitment to be more inclusive in its effort to dismantle racism. I also invite you, if it hasn't been done already, to be in partnership with faith communities to who also perhaps could set aside some of their funding to go towards person of color businesses and support them specifically. As a former teacher, I also recommend that whatever process that you use, especially in the renaming of Faneuil Hall, that you please involve the students and the youth in the schools to learn about this history and to be involved in this process as well. I thank you very much, and that's all I'm going to say. But know that this effort will definitely be in my prayers for sure. Thank you.
Thank you, Sister Linda. We do appreciate you being here. Thank you. Thank you very much. So I'm going to move on to Marilyn Burrows. Are you okay with us?
Hello.
Hello. Do you want to be seen too, or no?
I don't have to.
Okay.
I'll just read.
Okay, my love. So I'm going to start the timer. You now have the floor.
Hey, good afternoon, Honorable Committee Chair. My name is Marlene Burrows. I live in the city of Boston. I also work in the city of Boston, mother of 2 kids and a grandchild, and very active in my community. I'm a voter and a great supporter of the New Democracy Coalition. Creating an economic foundation for the Black community in Boston is paramount. For this reason, I'm very invested in urging for racial equality in Boston. I would like to see expanded opportunities for Black and Brown entrepreneurs in Boston, especially Faneuil Hall and the Faneuil Hall Marketplace. I am pleased that the council is holding this very important hearing. Racial reconciliation in Boston stands as a priority for all of us. Please accept this statement for the public record regarding docket number 219, regarding docket number 21-0148. I wish to express my serious concern about the lack of businesses opportunities in Faneuil Hall and Faneuil Hall Marketplace in downtown Boston. As a member in the Boston Black community, I'm aware of the lack of opportunities for Black entrepreneurs in Boston. My understanding is that of the 143 businesses at Faneuil Hall, not one is owned by a Black person or a brown person. That's less than 1%. This is very disturbing reality and speaks to the Boston persistent inequity in the city of Boston. I'm aware of the struggles within the Black community, especially as they return to social justice. The income and wealth gap between the Black and brown and the white people in Boston is alarming. Black communities lack opportunity to thrive in the area of education and public health. When Black people are locked out of places like Faneuil Hall and the Faneuil Hall Marketplace, the Black community is damaged. We all suffer from practices of discrimination. Obviously, this needs to change. I urge that you and your colleagues move quickly to establish enforceable policies to address the issues of economic inequity that now exists at Faneuil Hall. Please ensure that this statement be made part of the public record. Sincerely, Merlene Burrows.
Thank you, Merlene. Really do appreciate your testimony. I'm gonna move on. We're doing really great. We only have like 20 more people to go. We're moving on to Jacob.
Can you guys hear me now?
Yes.
Awesome. Thank you guys so much. I will keep my public testimony brief. We got here today because we are actively attempting to not only advocate for the increase of Black, brown, and minority-owned businesses and their investments in the city of Boston, but also to implement an equitable process in which Black and brown-owned businesses are included within the proximate area and are able to benefit from the influx of funds that go into that certain area due to foot traffic and tourism. Now, when we consider that Black and brown-owned businesses in Boston have only received 1.2% of the $2.1 billion in contracts over the last 5 years, there is no question that Boston has been failing to fairly support our communities. We have seen the inequalities of our Black and brown-owned businesses faced, especially through this pandemic, and excluding access to areas such as Faneuil Hall that amasses around $20 million in tourism is a direct assault to our communities. When our businesses are just as redlined and restricted to our redline neighborhoods, it is a vivid demonstration that Boston has yet to go far enough to address the systems that are in place that keep our communities oppressed. What surprised me was that we as a city claim to be progressive, we as a city deem to be democratic and progressive in nature, we as a city have a diverse body of elected officials, yet we still have to have these cyclical conversations around advocating for Black and brown-owned businesses to be able to enter spaces and thrive. I would assume that acknowledging issues such as this would be priorities for us, especially since we as a city are often categorized as one of the top 5 most racist cities in the US. A National Service Commission by the Globe found that amongst 8 major cities, Black people ranked Boston the least welcoming of people of color. More than half, 54%, rated Boston as unwelcoming, and those inequalities that businesses of color face only add to this perspective that we have attained. And so I come here to acknowledge that we have to face the realities here in Boston and really stop this political correctness perspective. We have to be unapologetic in disrupting inequalities. We must be unapologetic in addressing how the median net worth of a non-immigrant African-American household in the greater Boston region is $8. Our desire should be to be examples to follow for other cities, but that cannot take place until we have a hard look at our city. That cannot take place until Faneuil Hall is renamed, and that cannot take place until Black and brown-owned businesses are invested in and allowed to thrive in areas where they were previously denied access, such as the Seaport, Newport, and Faneuil Hall. And for those who keep hearing Faneuil Hall, understand that we keep bringing it up because the city owns this area. And so we need to turn inaction into action. I conclude by saying we have a duty to residents of the city, a duty to small business owners in Dorchester, Mattapan, Roxbury, Roslindale, Hyde Park, and Jamaica Plain. And so we are here asking you to meet this moment with the action that our communities demand. We have been given a moment. Now the question is, will you just hear our concerns or will you actually listen? Will we be bystanders or will we become active participants that partake in change? The ball is in your court now. How will you respond? Thank you so much, Madam Chair.
Yes, y'all know y'all got that. You going 3 minutes there. Thank you for that. I'm gonna move quickly, and I really do love this whole idea of meeting this moment, which is one of the reasons why we hosted this hearing, because we don't want to have a conversation about the conversation. We're really moving into action here. So really grateful for everyone who is here today to bring us there, including former Councilor Yancey, who I know is going to become the chair of this mission that we're going to be leading here. So I'm going to go next to Claire. You now have the floor.
Mute. Okay, can you hear me now?
Yes, clear.
Okay, great. Thank you so much, Councilor Mejia, Honorable Committee Chair. And this again is going to be part of the docket 21-0148. And please accept the testimony for the public record. I would like to read, in addition, 5 names that I will also be submitting on behalf of this same docket. David Eastmond, Derek Smith, Janice L. McManus, Jeremy Thompson, and Paige Mallory. There's also 2 other statements I've been asked to read that I can read parts of, but first let me get through mine. So I want to thank you, first of all, for holding this hearing. I think it's been very fascinating. My name is Claire Goslin. I live in Rosendale. Thanks to the New Democracy Coalition for their advocacy. Boston is a diverse city whose population includes Black and Native Americans, along with European and other settlers from its earliest years. However, there has been an overall lack of economic opportunities for Black, Latinx, and Indigenous business owners in our city. I recognize that Faneuil Hall Marketplace, in spite of being named after a slaver, is an historic national landmark. And everybody's talked about how many businesses there are there and how they don't include people of color. I'm not going to repeat that. However, it is a pattern of inequity at one of the most visited tourist and commercial centers in our city and the nation. When I travel to other places, I value learning about the residents and their histories and prefer to support businesses that are local and embedded in the community. It's much more interesting and unique. And in this second decade of the 21st century, let's seize the opportunity for Boston to embrace and include businesses that represent who the city is: Black, Brown, Native American, White, and Asian American. This would be a win-win for our city. This is a positive change. I strongly urge the Boston City Council to remedy the lack of businesses of color at Faneuil Hall and the other prime venues that have already been mentioned. And this definitely has to be done through ordinance and monitored compliance and enforcement. It's the right thing to do, and it will provide improved economic opportunities for many residents of color who live, vote, and pay taxes. Let's move forward in addressing this injustice and promoting a more representative and vibrant economic opportunity climate. And if I have a moment, I'd like to read at least some of the 2 other testimonies.
So Claire, do you want to read the names of the people that you want to just add their names to the record?
Okay, and I will submit their testimonies. Yeah. The other name is Daniel Rivalian and Fabian De Peza. So I will submit those as well to the record. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Claire. Really do appreciate your voice in the space. We're gonna now move on to Domingos de la Rosa. You now have the floor.
The correct saying of my name is Domingos de Rosa. Thank you for hosting this hearing. We appreciate the City Council, Small Business Committee to sit and speak on an ongoing issue that's been growing out of control here in Boston. At this time, I'd like to submit my statement to public record, docket number 1088. Hi, my name is Domingos de Rosa. I live at 1569 River Street, Hyde Park, Mass. I am a resident, active member of my community, a Black business owner, excuse me, and a member of the New Democracy Coalition of Massachusetts. I am vested in racial equality in Boston. The lack of Black business opportunities here in Boston for Black and Brown business owners within Faneuil Hall, Quincy Market Square, Waterfront, and other business areas here in Boston causes great concerns to individuals like myself. Out of 140 businesses operating within, not one is owned or operated by a Black business owner. This is disturbing. The income and wealth gap between Blacks and whites in Boston is disgraceful, and that needs to be changed. Today's Blacks networked are set at $8. In 1976, Blacks were worth $800, 10 times more than today. I urge the City Council to move quickly to establish enforcement policies to ensure and address the economic inequalities and discrimination practices. We suffer from practices from Peter Faneuil used to oppress millions and enslaved Blacks and brown people for 400 years. Ignoring the history of this building continues to hold back Black and brown residents enslaved today. Unknown to our immigrant community who become American citizens, they receive their naturalization certificates within these same walls where slaves were sold off. The mayor and the city councils are all sworn into office within the same walls. We cannot allow this to continue to happen in 2021. Our demands are to create and implement policies on city-owned properties leased as marketplace to include 51% Bostonians, 40% Black and brown business owners, 12% women-owned businesses, change the name of Peter Faneuil Hall to a name residents vote on, such as Christmas Addicts. Educate our BPS students within the public history of this building, create a tourism tax to the area to fund opportunities for Black and brown businesses to obtain occupancy within the Christmas Addicts Market Square. I've also included articles and facts that go along to support our argument. This is unbecoming of a city. Boston can't continue to allow these practices to continue to happen as we change into our new generations and give our children and our families opportunities to achieve greatness within the city of Boston. I thank you for your time and appreciate further discussion on this issue as we move forward.
Thank you, Domingos. Appreciate you here. I'm gonna move on to the next. We probably have like 16 more people to go. So I'm gonna just advise central staff, we're just gonna be a little bit later than anticipated, but here we go. Moving on to Lorraine. Hi, Lorraine, you're on mute, my love. So I'll start the timer again. Hold
there
on.
we go. Thank you. Hi, my name is Lorraine Folks, and I'm here to read 6 letters, one of which is my own, but I will read mine and one other and then add the names on to the into the record. Again, my name is Lorraine Folks, and I'm here to testify regarding docket 210148. Dear members of the Boston City Council, I'm a former resident of Roxbury, and I've had the honor of working as Chief of Staff with City Councilor Gareth Saunders, the late Chuck Turner, and a special assistant to City Councilor Yancey. Hi, Councilor Yancey. I recognize Faneuil Hall Marketplace is a historic national landmark, and I know everyone else does because it's right across the street where everyone goes to eat. I am here to testify because I'm concerned about the overall lack of economic opportunities for Black and brown business owners and entrepreneurs in the city of Boston. This is my primary focus today, beyond the fact that Boston needs to change the name. It is my understanding that there are no business establishments at Faneuil Hall or at the Faneuil Hall Marketplace that are owned by people of color. This is tantamount to racial and economic discrimination at one of the most visited tourists and commercial centers in the city and the nation. Racial exclusion is patently wrong, and the Boston City Council has the power to act and must do so quickly to remedy this problem through ordinance, monitored compliance, and enforcement. I believe, as do many like me, that economic inequity for Black and brown people is indirectly connected to the lack of economic opportunities for many people of color who live, vote, and pay taxes in this city. We look forward to an immediate response with all deliberate speed to this gross injustice. Thank you for holding this hearing. This is very, very important. Now, the names of the other folk, Shaya Hassan, Sabrina Chang, Arlene Burkdale, Makalia Pollard, Janice Fernandez, and Loviana Prince are the names that I'm reading into the record, but I do want to read at least one more letter. It's very short, if I have the time. Honorable Committee, and this one is from Ms. Chang. Honorable Committee Chair, on June 12, 2020, former Mayor Martin Walsh declared racism an emergency and a public health crisis in the city of Boston and ordered every city cabinet, department, agency, and office to take all necessary steps. If Boston City Council truly has the intention to address the emergency of racism, why not start with what is owned by the city, Faneuil Hall, which is right across the street? The absence of Black-owned businesses at Faneuil Hall signals Bostonians and visitors from all around the world that Boston is a city that does not invest in Black citizens. The absence of Black-owned businesses at Faneuil Hall directly undermines its reputation as the cradle of liberty. Cradle for whose liberty? The absence of Black-owned businesses at Faneuil Hall is the presence of white supremacy. Establishing Black-owned businesses at Faneuil Hall will not eradicate Boston's significant racial wealth gap, struggles and with racial segregation or continued othering of the Black community, but it sure is a start. And that's signed Sabrina Chang. So that is what I wanted to make sure was in the record. And by the way, those suggestions that were just formally spoken about, the fund, the making the BRA and the DND come before you to explain what it is that they are not doing and why they are actually giving permission and letting folks move in, take over, and not involve any of us is a question. Thank you. And I appreciate the fact that you had this hearing.
Thank you, Lauren. Thank you. Really grateful for you and your leadership and, you know, for your prep work that we had an opportunity to do before this. So thank you for all that insight. Okay, so we are moving along. Caroy Ferguson, just I'm sure you will school me and let me know how to pronounce your name correctly. But you now have the floor. Okay, moving on to Damari Roman. Okay. What happened to everybody? Can y'all hear me? I just want to make sure you can hear me. Next, I'm just gonna go to Mary. Try asking Damari. Damari, if you're here, you now have the floor. Carrie, you could find out if folks are in the waiting area, maybe any of these folks. I'm gonna move on to Mary. Burton? No? Did Lorraine just drop the mic and everybody got afraid, now everybody left? Let me find out. Okay, I'm gonna move on to Catherine Rinkfin.
Catherine Rifkin. Do you hear me? Do you hear me?
Would you like to be seen too?
Oh yeah, oh right. Press all these little buttons. There we go. Oh, there it is. Okay. Catherine Rifkin. Do you hear me? Do you hear me?
Would you like to be?
Excuse me? Oh, I hope I'm doing the right thing here.
You are.
Okay. I'm happy to rise. Okay, I'm Catherine Rifkin. I live in Bedford, Mass. And I also am part on the board of directors of Massachusetts Cannabis Reform Coalition. I started the Education Village, which exposes the racist beginnings of prohibition. And it's now Jim Crow in like different clothes. But anyhow, I am happy to rise with my fellow citizens to protest the latent, systemic, and institutionalized racism that's still involved in this city. I think we need to say out loud that racism is not acceptable, that we acknowledge that Peter Faneuil was involved in the slave trade, that we change the name of the building as a gesture of good faith. that Black vendors be given a spot that represent, in order to represent the diversity of the city, and those spots be free, to acknowledge that reparations are due, but no account will, no amount will ever be enough. We could certainly subsidize space. We could also, landlords could take the subsidy off on their taxes. But anyhow, I look forward to being a part of a unified measure to build the community we want to live in. So thank you very much for this opportunity. I cede back my time.
Thank you, Catherine. Really do appreciate your comments and your testimony. I've been led to believe that Karen Ferguson is now in the Zoom.
I cede back my time.
Thank you, Catherine. Really do appreciate your comments and your testimony. I've been led to believe that Karen Ferguson is now in the Zoom.
I cede back my time.
Thank you, Captain. We do appreciate your comments and your testimony. I've been led to believe that Karen Ferguson is now in the Zoom. Okay, I don't know what is going on here. I'm hearing, and not that we don't like to hear ourselves, but whoever is live streaming and we must mute the live stream. So I think, Mr. Ferguson, that might be you. If you don't mind turning off your YouTube just for your comments, that would be really helpful. So that way we can hear you only and not the background noise. I'm gonna unmute you and see if that works. Okay. Mr. Ferguson, you now have the floor. Oh, I'm sorry, Mr. Ferguson, you're on mute. We are unable to hear you. Okay, you're still on mute. Okay, let's try that one more time. On mute, we are unable to hear you.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Can you hear me now?
Okay, you're still on mute. Okay, let's try that
Oh
one more
dear.
time. On mute, we are unable to hear you.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay. Can you hear me now?
Okay, you're still on mute. Okay, let's try that one more time. On mute, we are unable to hear you.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay. Can you hear me now?
Okay, you're still on mute.
Hello. Okay. My sincere apologies for all of the technology here. My name is Professor Karoy Ferguson, and thank you so much for the opportunity to speak with you. I have my glasses up, but most people put their glasses down to read their statements. But let me just read my statement very briefly. My name is Professor Karoy Ferguson. I teach at UMass Boston, as well as serve as Human Services Program Director. And many of my students are residents of the city of Boston and do internships at various human service agencies in Boston. I'm a voter. I'm active in my community, and I'm very invested in urging the manifestation of racial equity in Boston. Please accept this statement for the public record regarding Docket 1088. I wish to express my serious concern about the lack of business opportunities at Faneuil Hall and Faneuil Hall Marketplace. My understanding, as many have stated before, is that there are 143 businesses at Faneuil Hall, and not one is owned by a Black person. And of course, this is also disturbing and speaks to the ongoing inequity in the city of Boston. Now, various historians paint various pictures about race relations in Boston throughout the years. But one common theme is the ongoing struggle for racial and economic parity in an quote unquote unacknowledged de facto segregated city. Now that struggle and unacknowledged de facto segregation is mirrored by the lack of Black-owned and operated businesses at Faneuil Hall and the Faneuil Hall Marketplace. In Todd Wallach's Boston Globe's follow-up article to 2017 Boston Globe 7-part series, he identified at least 11 takeaways. And the first one was that Boston really does have a racist reputation. 2, Boston families are much poorer than white ones. 3, Greater Boston is whiter than most other major metro areas. 4, it is hard to find prosperous Black neighborhoods in Metro Boston. 5, discrimination is real. 6, Black enrollment in many colleges remain low. 7, Boston's newest neighborhood is also one of the whitest. It is the waterfront. 8, healthcare is segregated too. 9, Boston's image has been damaged by a few racist sports fans. 10, few Black people hold positions of power. And 11, there are plenty of potential solutions. So it's in regard to this last takeaway where race, reconciliation, and repair work can and should be foremost in the consciousness of decision makers as it relates to business opportunities at Faneuil Hall and the Faneuil Hall Marketplace. One solution might entail, for example, as someone has already mentioned, creating a Faneuil Hall Black Business Startup Opportunity Fund, earmarked for the creation of Black businesses in this iconic public space. As a public iconic space, another reconciliation and repair solution might be to providing a more complete history about how this public space was established. And this could, involve a name change along with public information that references also known as Faneuil Hall and Faneuil Hall Marketplace. So it's important for visitors who enter this public space to know what they are viewing and participating in.
Thank you.
I'm aware that the struggles within the Black community are great, especially as they pertain to social justice. And as research has indicated, the income and wealth gap between Blacks and whites in Boston is disgraceful, and Black communities lack opportunities to thrive. And when they're locked out of places like Faneuil Hall and like the Faneuil Hall Marketplace, the Black community is damaged. So we all suffer, from practices of discrimination. So obviously this needs to change. So I urge that you and your colleagues move quickly to establish enforceable policies to address issues of economic inequity that now exist at Faneuil Hall. Please ensure that this statement is made a part of the public record. Sincerely, Professor Karoy Cuff Ferguson. Thank you very much. And again, my apologies for the technology issues.
Okay, no worries. Thank you so much for your testimony. I am going to move on to Mary. Are you with us? I called on you earlier, but not sure if you're with us. I'm going to move on. In 3, 2, 1. I'm moving on to Alan Tainer. You now have the floor.
All right. Thank you, everybody. Thank you, Councilor Mejia. Good afternoon. My name is Minister Alan Tainer. I am a leader with Prophetic Resistance Boston. Prophetic Resistance Boston is a group of clergy and congregation members from several Black churches in Boston neighborhoods. We have moved from within the four walls of the church to actively engage with communities of color by listening to their individual stories and then moving those collective stories to public action. I am here to speak on the matter of Faneuil Hall. For the past 3 years, Prophetic Resistance Boston has been listening to the stories of mass incarceration of Black and Brown residents in Boston. We heard over 500 stories of the impacts of quarries through over policing in Boston Black neighborhoods and how it has impacted the ability for our communities to thrive. Generations of systemic racism under the pillar of white supremacy is the root cause of Black people not having the opportunity to thrive and prosper. And the calls of agonizing pain from our ancestors are embedded in each stone that holds up the walls of Faneuil Hall. Black bodies were allowed to be sold as human chattel into the horrific atrocities of slavery through Peter Faneuil, who profited from systemic racism. To this day, the tourist monument sits in his honor as Black people in 2021 are still considered not worthy to own businesses in the largest tourist attraction in Boston. Over 100 businesses and not one owned by a Black merchant. As leaders of Prophetic Resistance Boston, we ask, why is this? How does this generation work together to change an inherent wrong? Most importantly, who do we hold accountable for this wrong if this wrong is not made right? Finally, equity and inclusion cannot continue to be the catchphrase of Boston leadership when mere feet away from City Hall lies the biggest injustice of inequity is permitted to stand uncorrected by not including Black businesses in Faneuil Hall. Thank you for your time. Prophetic Resistance Boston, located at 14 Cushing Ave, Dorchester, Massachusetts. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm gonna move on now to
Adoranki Lipidi.
Adoranki Lipidi. Thank you so very much. You now have the floor.
Thank you, Madam Chair, for holding this meeting. My name is Adoranki Lipidi. I'm an attorney and also a student at the Boston University School of Theology. I come here in support of opening up opportunities for African Americans, Brown people, and other minorities. At this point, we have 0 minority-owned businesses at Faneuil Hall. There is an absolute connection between Peter Faneuil and the slave trade. In 1742, Peter Faneuil entered into a business venture with others when he sent a ship that was named the Jolly Bachelor on the slave trading mission to Guyana, which is part of West Africa. During a slave trade mission, 70 to 80 slaves were put on board. However, Africans raided that boat and released the slaves. About 34 slaves were actually recaptured and set sail on the Middle Passage to Rhode Island, Massachusetts. The inventory sheet on the Jolly Bachelor revealed that 20 Negroes were in the cargo of the ship. 14 souls perished on the Middle Passage to Rhode Island. Now, today, Peter Faneuil's activities would be considered human trafficking, a crime against humanity under Article 4 of the United Nations Declaration of Human Rights, and a violation of the 13th and 14th Amendment of the Constitution. The economic exclusion of Black and minority-owned businesses at Faneuil Hall today is a microcosm of the systemic racism experienced by Black and minority populations throughout Boston and the country. A targeted plan to increase Black and minority business presence at Faneuil Hall is essential because Faneuil Hall is owned by the city of Boston, and such a plan could serve as an example of how to close the alarming income disparity gap suffered by Black, brown, and other racial minorities in Boston. There's a moral debt that is long overdue to Bostons and Black Boston. We request the City Council to take immediate steps to ensure minority participation in Faneuil Hall. There is a lot of talk about racial equality in Boston. However, we need action from the City Council to correct the lack of business opportunities at Faneuil Hall and in other locations within Boston's downtown. We need action from the City of Boston to redirect the profits earned from Faneuil Hall to benefit the Black and brown communities who have been systemically locked out of business opportunities at Faneuil Hall and other locations. We need action from the City Council of Boston to address the lack of business opportunities. We respectfully request that the City Council of Boston develop a targeted plan to increase the number of Black and brown businesses at Faneuil Hall. I request that this be entered into the record under docket number 210148. Sincerely, Adirunke Lippidy. Thank you.
Thank you for that. We still have 6 more people to go. Just going to do a friendly reminder. And for those folks who have testified and they know what it's like to testify in public hearings, we've done it on city council. We've done it in city council. We've done it in school committee. You know, there is an accountability here for the amount of time that we spend. So I just don't want you all thinking that the practice that I'm doing is what we should be doing, because we need to really keep within time. And so I've been really mindful of that. But normally under any other circumstances, folks do know that it's a 2-minute warning and it's a 2-minute timer. And this is on school committee and city council hearings. So I am being really generous, and I just want us to make sure that we're utilizing our 2 minutes in the best way we can. For the remaining speakers, we have heard and we know that a lot of folks are also talking about the name change, but I really want you all to encourage you all, for those who are still remaining, to really try to limit your time to the 2 minutes. And I really do appreciate you all and your patience, and central staff. Again, Kerry, thank you so very much for all your hard work and for being so patient with us. We're almost there. All right, so I'm gonna move on to Isabella DePina. Yes.
Hello, hi. So I want to put in the UMB Coalition, the University of Massachusetts Boston Coordination of Student Alumni, and they also wrote a letter. But I could briefly say me. My name is Isabel DePina. I live in Dorchester section of Boston. I am a voter. I am very active in my community. I am a mother. I am a supporter of the New Democracy Coalition. I am testifying to say that we need fairness and equity in the city for people of color. The Boston City Council can play a significant role in achieving these things. But I also want to mention, would I be able to read a paragraph of this? We reside all throughout the state of Massachusetts. We are voters, active community members, working class students, students of color, immigrants, single parents, and much more. As a testifier of fairness, equity, and diversity country, and the state where people of color are strong stakeholders, we provide our full support to the new democracy, so correlation, which present themselves as such. For too long, people of color have been classified as second-class citizens. We have been denied support, opportunity, accessibility, and affordability on every end: education, healthcare, housing, and public safety. In a community, deprivativeness has been the worst when individuals and communities are denied the ability of financial sustain a future for themselves. Our city becomes lesser, no matter how much downtown and the Seaport District may be commercialized to be considered the new Boston. I'm also taking a class of the new Boston. Boston's racist, and we need to dismantle racism again. It's not fair for our family and for everybody else.
Thank you for always showing up and bringing all your fierceness into every space that I see you in. Thank you. I'm gonna move on to Rev Kante. Rev, I see you here. Rev.
I'm here. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you. Do you want to be seen?
I do. Hold on, not yet. Give me 1 second. 1 second, literally.
I literally gotta ask people if they want to be seen too, because.
Okay, no, I appreciate it. Just give me 1 second. I'm unmuted and go ahead.
Yeah, okay, so I'm sending you a request to start your video.
Okay.
There we go. There we go. Hello.
All right. Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you. So my name is Reverend Minister Brother Conte Thorpe, and I am want to go on record along with my colleagues today for this hearing. I'm a founder and director of the Thorpe Foundation. The Thorpe Foundation focuses on youth development. I'm a longtime Boston resident. I'm a supporter of the New Democracy Coalition in its efforts to change the name of Faneuil Hall. I am a voter. I am active in my community as a longtime advocate in the Black community and the city of Boston, and a civil servant. I have seen so much suffering that is linked to the lack of financial resources. Creating the economic foundation of the Black community in Boston is paramount. For this reason, I am very invested in urging the racial equity in Boston. I would like to see expanded opportunities for Black entrepreneurs in Boston. Faneuil Hall and the Faneuil Hall Marketplace will be a venue wherein we can begin a movement towards supporting so-called minority businesses. I am pleased that the council is holding this very important hearing today. Racial reconciliation in Boston stands as a priority for us all. You guys, can you hear me? Okay, one more thing. Please accept this statement for the public record regarding Docket 210148. I wish to express my serious concerns about the lack of business opportunities at Faneuil Hall and the Faneuil Hall Marketplace in downtown Boston. As a member in the Boston Black community, I'm aware of the lack of opportunities for Black entrepreneurs in Boston. My understanding is that of the 143 businesses at Faneuil Hall, not one is owned by a Black person. I have a serious problem with that. We have a serious problem with that. And you all should too. That less than 1%, that is less than 1%. This is disturbing. This is a disturbing reality, and it speaks to the persistent inequality in the city of Boston. I'm aware of the struggles within the Black community, especially as they pertain to social justice. The income wealth gap between Black, brown, and white people in Boston is alarming. Black communities lack opportunities to thrive in the areas of education and public health. When Black people are locked out of places like Faneuil Hall and the Faneuil Hall Marketplace and other places, the Black community is damaged and all of our communities are damaged. We all suffer from practices of discrimination. Obviously, this needs to change. As a member of Boston's Black clergy and faith community, I cannot stress how important it is to address the issues of access, resources, and opportunity for Black and Brown people in Boston. As a minister of the gospel, I urge that you and your colleagues move quickly to establish enforceable policies to address the issues of economic inequality that now exist pertaining to Faneuil Hall and Boston, the city of Boston. Please ensure that this statement be made part of the record. Sincerely, Reverend Conte K. Thorpe.
Thank you.
I have one more I'd like to read.
What you mean one more? Let me find out. You already 2 minutes over your time. You want to
got one.
Their names?
Please, I want to put the names in, and I have one more to read.
You know, like they're never gonna let me host any more hearings because
I'm sorry, sister, but this is imperative. Our children depend on this. Amen.
Amen. Go on ahead. Yeah, I'm not gonna make
Okay.
sure that you know he's speaking right through you. So
Okay, thank you. The names I'm going to give for the record are Jennifer Lundy. I also had Kizzy Ruiz. And I had Mary Burton's letter. And the letter that I'm going to read next, respectfully, thank you, Madam Chair, for giving me this extended time, is through Reverend William E. Dickerson, my bishop. My name is Reverend E. Dickerson. I am the bishop of the Greater Love Tabernacle Church in Dorchester. I am a longtime Boston resident. I am a supporter of the New Democracy Coalition in its effort to change the name of Faneuil Hall. I am a voter. I am active in my community. And as a longtime advocate in the Black community, I've seen so much suffering that is linked to the lack of financial resources. Creating an economic foundation for the Black community in Boston is paramount. For this reason, I am very invested in urging the racial equality in Boston. I would like to see expanded opportunities for Black entrepreneurs and Brown entrepreneurs in Boston. Faneuil Hall and the Faneuil Hall Marketplace will be a venue wherein we can begin a movement towards supporting so-called minority businesses. I am pleased that the council is holding this very important hearing today. Racial reconciliation in Boston stands as a priority for us all. Please accept this statement for the public record regarding Docket 210148. I wish to express my serious concerns about the lack of business opportunities at Faneuil Hall and the Faneuil Hall Marketplace and downtown Boston and Boston overall. As a member of the Boston's Black community, I'm aware of the lack of opportunities for Black entrepreneurs in Boston. My understanding is that of 143 businesses, as stated before with my colleagues today, at Faneuil Hall, not one is owned by one Black person. Why is that? That's less than 1%. This is disturbing, a reality, and speaks to the persistent inequality in the city of Boston. I'm aware of the struggles within the Black community, especially as they pertain to social justice. The income and wealth gap between Black, brown, and white people in Boston is alarming. Black communities lack opportunity to thrive in the areas of education and public health. When Black people are locked out of places like Faneuil Hall and the Faneuil Hall Marketplace and businesses in Boston, the Black community and all communities are damaged. We all suffer from practices of discrimination. Obviously, this needs to change. As a member of Boston's Black clergy and faith community, as a leader, I cannot stress how important it is to address the issues of access and opportunity for Black and brown people in Boston. I urge that you and your colleagues move quickly to establish enforceable policies to address the issues of economic inequality, that now exist at Faneuil Hall. Please ensure that this statement has been made part of the public record. Sincerely, Reverend William Dickerson of Greater Love Tabernacle
Thank you for
Church. Thank you. I appreciate you.
No,
God bless.
I appreciate you. I think, and I also want to make note for the record that there are 0% businesses in the Faneuil Hall area, 0. So there's a lot of work to do. And this is what this hearing calls for, is if we're really serious about economic justice, this is what it looks like, and holding ourselves accountable to that. So I really do appreciate everyone's voice. We have a few more folks and we're almost done, Carrie, I promise you. Going to ask CMM Interfaith, I believe.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for joining us. I'm going to move on to CMM Interfaith. You now have the floor.
Yes, thank you. Before I begin my statement, and I will limit myself to 2 minutes, I would like to read into the record 9 other names. Milasar Mabayaka, Michelle Denis, Linda Blake, Louvienne Prince, Latonia Patton, Judith Kasaki, Josemarie Gomes Timas, Fatima Herrera, and Eric Quest. I write as Executive Director of the Cooperative Metropolitan Ministries and as having taught in the Boston area's theological schools for a quarter century. This letter is written on behalf of the CMM Board of Directors, Boston's oldest interfaith social justice network. CMM does considerable work in Boston around the issues of anti-racism, peacemaking, and nonviolence. Our program, Values Over Violence, has hosted 6 multi-week workshops for youth by Zoom over the period of the pandemic alone. This letter comes out of a deep concern respecting the racial inequalities evident in high-volume commercial centers in Boston. We encourage expanding access for minority business enterprises. Boston's disparity of income between its white and Black populations is well known and has been subject to analysis by the Boston Globe and its Spotlight series dating back to 2017. The near absence of Black and brown business enterprises in high volume areas of the city illustrates this division. It is incumbent on City Council to look into ways to make high volume commercial centers more accessible to entrepreneurs of color. It is significant that some of these centers, like Faneuil Hall, suffer from historic emotional barriers to the idea of setting up shop in an area named after a slaveholder and near a site of slave auctions. This makes a mockery of the very idea of a freedom trail on which Faneuil Hall sits. One cannot overestimate the psychological impediment to a flourishing minority culture and its economic realities in the place of such infamy. Therefore, we ask that the Boston City Council develop policies that address the issues of economic exclusion of Black, brown, and indigenous peoples, that it holds a hearing to discuss expanding access for minority business enterprises in high-volume commercial centers, and that it considers the impact that centers like Faneuil Hall serve as a disincentive to economic development. And I ask that this letter be written into the record. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so very much. Within time. Thank you. You made up for the rest of those folks who went over, so thank you for that. I'm gonna go on. I know Victor Arrington, you are, if you're here, you now have the floor. And I also, while we wait for Victor to appear, just wanted to, again, thank all of the advocates and the public that have shown up to advocate. It's really refreshing to see the depth of voices and the diversity. So just wanted to acknowledge that, Kevin, in your hard work and making sure that all the voices were being heard here today. So I just wanted to thank you for that. So Victor, I'm buying you a little bit of time. Are you here so you could say your testimony? Okay.
Yep, I'm here.
All right. Do you want to be seen on camera too?
Yes.
Okay, sir. So
I don't have nothing planned. I didn't write nothing, but I'm just going to support my good brother. And that's all I wanted to say. I just support my good brother in all of his endeavors. And I think we do need to make a change at Faneuil Hall. And that's all I really have to say. I didn't really write anything down.
That's okay. You're a man that speaks from his heart and a man of few words, but a mighty testimony. So thank you for.
All right. I'm a Boston firefighter and a community activist. Thank you.
Thank you, Victor.
Okay.
Thank you. All right. He just bought you some extra time, Kevin, just so you know. So I know, Kevin, you wanted to read some names into the record, and I'd love to give you an opportunity to do just that.
Thank you, Madam Chair, so much for paying attention to this issue. We said from the beginning that the renaming effort was really about more expansive issues such as economic development at Faneuil Hall, economic opportunities and access at places like Seaport, at places like Newbury Street. Your vision has given life to that initial vision. I have some heavy hitters. We're going to submit their names into the record, but I'd be remiss in not saying them on the record. I have a letter of a statement of support from Attorney John Lozada from the Latino Lawyers Association, a letter of support from the Reverend Bruce Wall of Bruce Wall's ministry and Boston Praise Radio, a letter of support from the Caribbean Foundation, Beulah Providence, another great leader in our community. I have a letter of support from Larry Ellison, former director of MAMLIO and a great public servant. I have a letter of support from the organization MAMLIO, Director Jeff Lopes. I have a statement of support from Pastor Franklin Hobbs, who leads up Heal Our Land Ministry. Tremendous letter of support, statement of support from retired Judge Leslie Harris, who supports this effort in terms of the name change and economic access and opportunity. There will be up to 125 letters of statements of support coming into your portals over the next 24 hours. We're so glad about the support from the community. And again, Councilor, we thank you for opening up the door in terms of having this very important conversation about economic opportunity for people of color all across the city. Faneuil Hall only stood as a metaphor for getting towards that conversation. Thank you again. And we hope to rejoin this conversation with public policy that's strengthened or created. Thank you again.
Thank you. Thank you, Kevin. Really do appreciate all of the energy that was put to make this hearing in place. You know, and Councilor Yancey, you stayed here for the whole entire time. Do you know how impressive that is? Thank you. You're on mute.
I only intended to spend 15 minutes with you today, but the testimony was so compelling, and your obvious concern and commitment was so transparent that I couldn't leave. I believe this is a very important issue, and I want to thank Kevin Peterson for his leadership. I want to thank you, Madam Chair, and all of your colleagues who spent some time with us. We can begin something very exciting for the city of Boston. And what we do will have an impact on the rest of the country and perhaps the world. A lot of people don't understand the significance of the Boston City Council. I was mocked and trivialized when I proposed back in 1984 that the city of Boston withdraw its funds from businesses supporting the Nazi-like regime in South Africa. It's the Councilor Yancey. Why spend time on this, an issue 10,000 miles away? And my response was, if we challenge racism in South Africa, we are also challenging racism right here at home. So I want to thank you for this opportunity, and please keep it up. If I can help in any way, let's talk about it.
Yeah, thank you. I know you got a 436, a 617-436 number that I don't know. I forgot the last 4 digits of it. So you and I are gonna have to.
4444, 436-4444.
I knew it was something like that. I couldn't, but yes, I'm so grateful for your partnership. And I already sent Senator Wilkinson a text message about all the people that I want in, and we definitely are gonna create a steering committee. I think we need to tackle this conversation. And if we're really serious about moving the needle, we're gonna have to roll up our sleeves and have some tough conversations, but come out with some viable recommendations and hold ourselves accountable to that. So I'm not one to have a conversation just for the sake of having it. And I'm really grateful to have the partnership of everyone who participated here today, because this is what it looks like when we lean in. So thank you to everyone. I don't know if there's anyone else that wants to speak. If you do, make sure you raise your little Zoom hand these days. But I don't think we have anyone left in public testimony. And so we're really just grateful for everyone who participated.
I just want to recognize Cole Harrison is trying to get on from Mass Action, and Reverend Evan Hines from Elliott Church wanted to articulate his support also.
Okay.
But, and I think he may be in the chat.
Okay, Mass Peace Action, you now have the floor.
Thank you, Councilor. My name is Cole Harrison. I am Executive Director of Massachusetts Peace Action, the largest grassroots peace and justice organization in the Commonwealth, with 1,200 dues-paying members and 15,000 supporters. Our organization exists to oppose endless U.S. wars and militarism. America's endless wars are largely directed at Black and Brown people. We know that America will never be a peaceful nation until it overcomes its own racism. I've also been a resident of Rosendale for 29 years and of the city of Boston for 45. Peter Faneuil grew rich in the 1700s by the triangular trade, which transported enslaved Africans to produce sugar in the West Indies and the Southern United States. And still today, our country uses sanctions, coups, and military interventions to enforce an unequal economic system in which most Africans, Asians, and Latin Americans toil for pennies, while many predominantly white Americans and Europeans enjoy a comparatively easy life. The police from Minneapolis to Boston act as an occupying army in communities of color. And at Faneuil Hall Marketplace, none of the businesses are Black or Brown owned. We need the city to fix this immediately. And thank you for your interest in the subject. Faneuil Hall is a national tourist attraction because that is where the American patriots of 1776 met to throw off a tyrannical king. But their American Revolution was incomplete and slavery continued. Peter Faneuil's role as both slave trader and donor of the building where our revolution was planned reminds us that we must complete the American Revolution with a social and economic reconstruction that eliminates racism. Let us start by bringing equity to minority-owned businesses in Faneuil Hall Marketplace, and then move on to establish racial justice in Boston and across our country. I've got 7 more statements to read. I'll be brief. This from Alan Booth. He lives in the Dorchester section of Boston, a voter active in his community. He's a member of the Ward 15 committee in Boston, a former union organizer, a supporter of the New Democracy Coalition. The social and political climate for Blacks is toxic, he writes. Our elected officials must be held accountable for this. I was shocked recently to see on YouTube members of the Boston City Council walk out on Black activists when they sought to bring the issue of structural racism to the council. I'm aware of the struggles within the Black community, especially as they pertain to social justice. The income and wealth gap between Black, brown, and white people in Boston is alarming. Black communities lack opportunities to thrive in the areas of education and public health. When Black people are locked out of places like Faneuil Hall and the Faneuil Hall Marketplace, the Black community is harmed. We must do better. We all suffer from the legacy and continued practices of discrimination in Boston. Obviously, this needs to change. I believe that the Boston City Council has the capacity to improve conditions for Black and brown families in Boston. I urge that you and your colleagues move quickly to establish enforceable policy to address the issues of economic inequity that now exist in Faneuil Hall. And I also have letters from Alberth Barroway, Asia Jackson, Sandy Charlot, Sarah Scholl, Shirley Cox, and Trisha Thomas. Thank you, Councilor Mejia.
I'm sorry, I had an internet freeze. I'm not sure if I'm even still here, but I mean, my internet kicked me out. Sorry.
I can hear you.
Sorry. I only missed a little bit. I only missed a little bit. I want you to know that I got to hear Alan's testimony. I only probably missed the last sentence or two, okay?
Okay, and I read off 7 more names of people whose letters I have, but we haven't got time to read them all, but we're going to submit them in writing.
Thank you. Thank you so very much for joining us. I am going to assume that now it's safe to say that we have gotten everyone else who wants to speak, right? Because we're now really over time. So if no one else has anything else to say, I just wanted to thank again those who provided public testimony, to our panelists. And if you have any other comments, please, it's important for you to send them over to Ron. Again, let me give you that email address because every voice matters. You could email your written testimony at sbwd@boston.gov. So please make sure that even if you did not get to be heard today, doesn't necessarily mean that your voice won't get counted. So you submit your written testimony, and we'll make sure that it gets part of the public record. So just wanted to thank everyone again for your participation and all of the amazing ideas that came of it. And just wanted to thank you all. And the way that we do this, because we're not in session, is I'll gavel out with this bottle of water and just let you know that this hearing is now to a close, and just thank you all for the next steps. I'll definitely be in touch. I'm going to keep this in committee, and we're going to talk about what do we do with what we know and how do we move forward collectively. So thank you. Thank you all. Have a beautiful evening. Bye. Thank you. Thank you, Carrie.
Bye.
Thank you, Carrie. Thank you, Central Staff. Thank you, Jacob. Thank you all. Thank you. Bye.